does not for us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, power, and
So what am supposed to be having? Yeah. Yes, you can have that. This House is in session. Minutes of the meeting held on Tuesday, 18th July 2023 to be confirmed. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed. Minutes of the meeting held on Thursday, July 20th, 2023 to be deferred.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be deferred.
The question is that the aforementioned minutes be deferred. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are deferred.
Your Honor. President, petitions, papers, government notices, private members' notices, notices of questions, report from select committees, first reading of bills, statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motion for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notice of motion for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42 subsection 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day sitting.
On the supplementary order paper. In naming Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport to resume debate on a resolution that this Honourable House take notice and support the statement made by the Minister on the 21st of July 2023 concerned in the history leading to the Memorandum of Understanding dated the 18th of July 2023 for a public-private partnership signed between the Granny Adams International Airport Incorporated and the Office of H.H. Sheikh Ahmed Dalmouk Al Maktoum an entity registered and incorporated in the United Arab Emirates, and Agencies Universales S.A., a company incorporated in Chile, for the modernization, expansion, upgrading, and management of the Grantley Adams International Airport. 2, recognizes and supports the commitment of the government of Barbados to reposition Barbados in the global aviation industry and redefining its role as a regional hub and as a beacon of excellence for travelers and cargo in the Americas, and supports the government's pledge to broaden economic enfranchisement and contribute to the expansion of opportunities for the workers of Barbados and the creation of wealth for them.
Honourable Member St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to address the Honourable House on this matter, which was tabled by resolution on the 21st of July 2023, last Friday evening to be precise. And Mr. Speaker, it perhaps has not escaped you that with respect to a memorandum dated only 3 days before, on the 18th of July 2023, that there has been tremendous alacrity on the part of the government in coming to this place, sir, in keeping with principles of fullest accountability, in order to give light and to give clarity to the matter about which we are engaged and about which we are intending to proceed. Mr. Speaker, I begin on this note because there are those who perhaps will ask themselves, why are we here in this place today engaged about this business? And there are equally those, Mr. Speaker, sir, who I have heard on the airwaves in recent days expressing a desire for there to be a better degree of clarity in terms of the policy direction, expressing, Mr. Speaker, sir, their uncertainty in one way or the other. And one has, sir, in a democracy, and I want to say a mature democracy, to be sufficiently sensitive to all views to recognize, Mr. Speaker, sir, that a request for clarity is not necessarily an effort to create an obstruction or to impede the progress of the government in the execution of its policy, but that we as citizens, elected by fellow citizens, coming here in purpose of serving those citizens, sir, have to be sensitive to any request for clarity which is offered. Equally, sir, where there's evidence of there being certainty, and that certainty very often in matters such as this is born out of a situation of being or never having been exposed to a matter of this nature before. And that is perfectly understandable for the people of Barbados, because even though we have tended to travel widely, we may have not recognized as we traveled that we are leaving a state-owned, state-operated airport, and you arrive, for example, in Jamaica, and you are arriving in a state-owned but privately operated airport. Or you arrive in the Bahamas and you realize you don't know that you're in a state-owned but privately operated airport. And those niceties and nuances, sir, perhaps are not the type of thing that the average citizen is going to keep top of mind, but it is for us, sir, a duty that we have to be able to remove the uncertainty. And wherever there is apprehension, sir, born out of not fully understanding what the policy is, it is the responsibility of those of us with whom the public has given, or to whom the public has given the gift of representation, to make sure that there is a discharge of the responsibility to explain fully. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, it is important to draw the parallel, because as I speak to you about sensitivities, I recall having to stand in this place and speak to you about sensitivities with regard to yet another national installation of significance to this country, both emotionally and economically, and that, sir, was Harrison's Cave. And much that we did with respect to Harrison's Cave, Mr. Speaker, is reflected here. And I want to say that it is perhaps the consistency of policy approach and the certainty of incidence of the policy that should give the people of Barbados the satisfaction and the degree of comfort in recognizing that the parallels are there and the quality of governance is there. And I will speak to some of the governance matters and governance issues, sir, in order to assist this chamber and, by extension, this country to fully appreciate the nature in which the discharge of the business of the government and the business of the people has improved appreciably in the life of this administration from that which we had endured before. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, this therefore is perhaps a day on which we do a stock taking, where we are able to say to the public where we are and why we are here, and to be able to give the public a sense of calm assurance by way of sharing information and ensuring that we have taken them into our confidence and vice versa. I begin there, Mr. Speaker, because I wanted to lay the foundation for taking us back. And I spent a little bit of time, sir, unearthing some of the material, and ironically, again, this is the nature of life in Barbados. It is not the first time that I have had to address you and this House, sir, on these matters. From the very beginning, there was occasion to come to this place and explain to the country what it was that we were intending to do with respect to Grantley Adams International Airport. And as I listened to the conversation nationally, I sense that sometimes people forget the very underpinnings of the effort. It was, sir, on a Valentine's Day, to be precise, the 14th of February in the year 2019, that I had to take a paper to Cabinet in order to invite the Cabinet to consider a proposal that the government of Barbados enter an arrangement with the International Financial Corporation, which is really, sir, the private sector arm of the World Bank, and to seek a concession or a concessionary arrangement, sir, for the operation, the development, the expansion, and, Mr. Speaker, sir, yes, operation, development, and expansion of Grantley Adams International Airport via what is called a public-private partnership. Now, sir, there was a rationale for doing that. I didn't just go to the Cabinet to entreat my colleagues on the basis of a whim and a fancy, Mr. Speaker, sir. But there were very practical realities which confronted me as Minister then of International Transport and Tourism, and which I think would have weighed heavily on the mind of the Prime Minister of Barbados when we would have had our private conversations about some of the things that were taking place at the airport, which we came and found. Now, sir, the rationale was premised, first of all, on some inadequacies at Grantley Adams International. I could simply capture all of them by saying, sir, that it was not an airport that at that time was fit for purpose. And that perhaps is to bundle it all up in a form of a few words. But let us be precise about what the problems were, and in some instances, sir, still are. Still are. Grantley Adams International Airport is a hub. It is a hub, Mr. Speaker, sir, for many international and regional carriers. At the same time, it serves this country admirably well as a gateway for the Eastern Caribbean. Back in 2018, when I became minister, sir, I was made privy, 2018, when I became, I would be as old as Methuselah. 2018. I was privileged to be briefed by the management team as it was then constituted at Grantley Adams International Airport. And one of the things that they drew to my attention, sir, was that we would have had, on the basis of 2017 figures, 328 international flights leaving Grantley Adams every week. And the figures were, at that time, when I became minister, 2.1 million passengers going through Grantley Adams International Airport per year. Now I'm going to take pains in the context of this debate, sir, to steer as wide a berth as possible from partisan politics, in much the same way as we had to do with the cave. Because I believe that when we are dealing with installations of national importance, it is critical that we speak to this country in the context of Barbadians talking to fellow Barbadians about those things that Barbados and Barbadians hold dear. And the Grantley Adams International Airport is one of them. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the context that I just gave you should be also expanded by indicating that not only did we have 2.1 million passengers, but we had a history of there being a pattern of growth at the airport in terms of the traffic that it was carrying. Now, this is something that began and has continued from as far back as the year perhaps 2003, 4, 5. I think when we had 9/11, that was 2001. From then on, coming forward, sir, there would have been this incremental pattern of growth at the airport. Much obliged to you. Thank you. And there then becomes other issues that one has to take into consideration. The projections that we have as a government, sir, would have seen us wanting to get to 2030, this is pre-pandemic projections, to get to 3 million passengers arriving in Barbados by the year 2030. You don't just come and say you want to have 3 million passengers arriving, sir, and it falls like manna from heaven that takes place. Because there has to be a holistic planning exercise. When these passengers come, they must stay somewhere. And therefore, there has to be part of your thinking, part of your forward future planning has to be, how do you build out your sector in terms of the rooms that you have available? Back at the time I would have become minister, sir, we had just roughly about 6,000 rooms on the island. The fact of the matter is we did endure parts of 2019, which was the so-called record year before COVID. We shut down in March, the end of March 2020. And in 2019, sir, that year, when we would have had the highest arrival ever, we would have had a situation, sir, in fact, it was January of 2020, when there would have been, I think that was the year that the English played Test cricket here in the Caribbean last. And there was an evening when Virgin Atlantic had an aircraft that had problems, could not take off. The incoming flight landed. But the people who were supposed to leave could not leave. There was nowhere to put people, sir, because all the rooms had been taken. There was no place. And it is a matter of historical record, sir, that night there had to be arrangements made on the beach side in Bridgetown. Virgin Atlantic had a center there. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that was a party atmosphere for a whole night and into the breakfast in the next day. There were no more rooms in the inn. That, Mr. Speaker, gives you a snapshot of the way in which traffic in Barbados had been progressing prior to COVID. Now, the concerns that I want to put before this House are very real, and I do not root them in my own personal views as a minister, because, as I said, I want to steer clear of any partisan perspective. But I want, Mr. Speaker, sir, for us to understand what the practical requirements and expectations are in this business. Now, every airport, sir, has to have a master plan. The purpose of the master plan, Mr. Speaker, sir, is so that you are able to go to one place and understand how the system-wide operation of the airport is expected to evolve. And the master plan, sir, will speak to a variety of considerations. When I became minister, the master plan was placed before me, and it spoke, sir, to the desirability of us being able to expand our regional lounge. It spoke, that is what we would customarily loosely call Gate 9. which was operated at that time by Liat 1974 Limited on the western side of the airport, on the western side of the terminal. It spoke, Mr. Speaker, sir, to airside expansion. And just so that we all understand what I'm talking about, airside expansion is the desirability, sir, of expanding that part of the airport when once you clear security, and at that time you had to clear immigration too, and you go inside the airport, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, there was a need to have that departure terminal expanded in terms of its capacity to carry passengers, seating, concessions, et cetera, food and beverage, so on. There was another concern in the master plan, Mr. Speaker, sir, air-to-sea transfer and the capacity for us to deal with the air-to-sea transfers that we have. And we know that once winter in particular sets in, so-called winter, no winter in Barbados, but the winter season internationally, once you get to October and the cruise lines coming in, Mr. Speaker, sir, you have on some days as many as 11, 12, 13 flights arriving with passengers to board a cruise ship, and equally, sir, you have people who are leaving in order to return from the cruise ship. And therefore, there is a need also to expand or improve the customer experience, and as I have said, the supporting amenities, many of which turn on basic things like washroom availability, seating, space, that type of general accommodation issue, Mr. Speaker, sir. Now, beyond the master plan, there are obviously some other concerns about which I think every Barbadian was privy. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we all have heard the stories or experienced and seen the leaking roofs. You are a practitioner of law, sir, so you know of the cases before the High Court where people have slipped and fallen at the airport. We have heard ad nauseum the stories of the long arrival lines, the long lines on arrival, especially waiting on customs and immigration, and the wait times associated therewith. It's a serious problem, Mr. Speaker, sir, especially on a day like this where it has been raining from 4 morning right up until now. And people arriving then standing on long lines in parts of a terminal, sir, which are also open air. So that the issue really is one of inhospitable accommodation as well. No space, Mr. Speaker, sir, or insufficient space for the seating of departing passengers. And then, of course, there were some security concerns, which I will speak to very briefly, because I don't want to belabor security concerns in this place. And, sir, then last but by no means least, the fact that this government came into office to find that the airport also had a problem, which was that the runway had extended its expected life. And in fact, one of the first orders of business that we had to do was to secure the necessary financing, I think by way of a 40 million United States loan, in order to rectify that problem. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, with regard then, let us go through, I've spoken to what the master plan's concerns, issues were, or expectations rather were. Let us marry the master plan's expectations with what the lived reality was. The master plan projects, sir, that for regional flights, we needed to have a lounge which had more seating. We needed to have a lounge which had washrooms. We needed to have a lounge, Mr. Speaker, sir, that had concessions for food and beverage. What we did not have was a lounge that could carry the capacity. We did not have a lounge that had a bathroom facility that could carry the capacity. In fact, I believe there were two bathrooms in the lounge, and there was an absence of food and beverage concession. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is the lived reality at Gate 9. The regional travel in 2018, 2019, Mr. Speaker, sir, saw daily occupancy levels at any one point in the day, going up as high as over 160 people in that Gate 9 lounge. But it was designed, Mr. Speaker, to seat 80 people. It was designed to carry 80 people. But you have over 160 people inside there. So you had people standing up waiting on an aircraft, couldn't find a place to sit down. You had but 2 washroom facilities, but 160 people inside the place, sir. You had no facility for those 160-odd people to get something to drink or something to eat. Sir, the throughput by LIAT in the year 2018 was 428,768 passengers, Mr. Speaker, sir, which is 21% of the 2.1 million that I told you about that had arrived that year. But the difficulty was compounded by the fact that Gate 9 was also being used by American Airlines, because the growth in traffic had become such that American Airlines would have had additional flights coming out of the United States, and there was no capacity to have all of the incoming flights on the evening, because if you study what happens at the airport, especially on evenings, sir, once you get to 1 o'clock or 2 in the evening, they start to fall almost like manna from heaven, one after the other after the other. To create the necessary space, therefore, Gate 9 was being used, especially on afternoons, by American Airlines. Well, Mr. Speaker, you are then adding to the 160-plus people who are doing regional travel, those who are coming through to be treated by American. Now, that, sir, was an untenable and impossible situation. The master plan speaks also of the need for us to have an expanded airside. I indicated what we mean by that, and the master plan is contemplating an upper-level terminal space and provision for the installation of jet bridges. Now, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that there's anybody in Barbados who has not visited almost every one of the Caribbean islands and viewed their operations with a certain degree of envy, because that which now happens next door in St. Vincent, for example, the jet bridges and so on, Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, Antigua, I could go on, Mr. Speaker, sir, seems to have eluded us. But the fact of the matter is that the lived reality, that's what the master plan talking about. The lived reality, sir, was that we have no upper level. One, in fact, we have was a makeshift expansion of the departure terminal to the eastern side of the building, so that is going as if you're going towards St. Philip away from the airport, sir, where 600 seats were put in with a view to accommodating air-to-sea passengers in particular. But even in that 600 seats, Mr. Speaker, sir, additional seating space, there was no food and beverage concession within that little space that was created. So you're putting in 600 more seats, then a food and beverage concession taking place. There is still inadequate seating capacity because, as I indicated to you, once the air-to-sea transfers start to take place, sir, you are accommodating cruise traffic, and you may have on any given day 8, 10, 11 planes full of people leaving and arriving in Barbados, being facilitated through there. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, these are some of the challenges, therefore, that are practical, and I say absent of politics. These are physical infrastructural challenges confronting Grantley Adams Airport. Some have been tampered with. We have tried to do adjustments. It's like treating an old bag. You put a little tape on it, one side here, burst out the other side. But you have to keep on working with it until when you can find the money to get a proper bag. And Mr. Speaker, sir, that's the type of analogy that I think is most appropriate. The master plan contemplates the enclosure and the waterproofing of the airside courtyard. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, here is where we have a challenge, because arriving passengers cross the open courtyard to enter the arrivals hall, as you know. But the master plan also requires, sir, it also requires the elimination of the security concern with respect to the airside courtyard. And that security concern is that if you are going to Gate 9 as a departing passenger, you have to cross that same open courtyard. People are arriving into Barbados as an incoming passenger, and they are expected to cross the same open courtyard. And what was taking place, sir, to the gross dissatisfaction of the regulatory authorities, ICAO, the Federal Aviation Authority, sir, is that there was a commingling of those arriving and those departing. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, anybody today who knows any little bit at all about how airports should work knows, sir, that one of the fundamentals is to separate the arriving passengers from the departing. There is to be no commingling. That is a matter of utmost security. And, sir, we have had to do our little thing as we do in Barbados. We are very creative people, and we will get the security guards to break the line and stand up and stop those who are going across from east to west or west to east, sir, and allow others to enter, and so on and so forth. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, though you can do that and be given, as they would say, you get a blind, the reality is, Mr. Speaker, sir, that that is not the best practice. It is not the way it should be done. It is not the way it is intended to be done, and it places you under great pressure when you're called upon to pass the tests which are being which are done by ICAO and the assessments by the Federal Aviation Authority and ICAO. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, as I said, these are not fanciful concerns, but they are operational concerns. The terminals themselves, built, I can't remember how long ago, but they were designed, Mr. Speaker, sir, they were refreshed. Work was done on the terminals in 2005, 2006. They were too small then, and they were enhanced so that the capacity that they would carry would be approximately 1,500 passengers in either of those two terminals, Mr. Speaker. The fact of the matter is, sir, that on any given day at peak time in 2018, 2019, sir, you were seeing 1,800 people passing through those terminals at peak time. So again, you have the capacity constraint, where you are 300 plus above what the carrying capacity was intended to be. And though we have had, obviously, and it is an interesting irony, COVID gave us a reprieve in this matter because air traffic fell off. But the problem has not gone away. And now that we are back up to 2017 levels and approaching 2018 levels, and expecting to get to 2019 levels, Mr. Speaker, sir, we cannot continue to sit idly by and await the problem to come back in full blast once again. With that, sir, there is also another aspect to it that bothered me personally, and that is that the airport, even if it did not have the problem of seating, has never been able to make special seating arrangement for persons with disabilities. That was done when I became Minister of Tourism. And it is still, Mr. Speaker, sir, an inadequate provision. And when we talk about treating the persons of disabilities, sir, I want to remind this House that the International Civil Aviation Organization has indicated that the highest level, the category with the highest degree of travel globally is in fact persons with disabilities. It may come as a surprise to you, sir, but very often, that disability category is a very wide category. And there are many people, sir, who are senior in life, but the disability is not necessarily so major as that they can't travel or can't travel with accompaniment. They have injured themselves one way or the other and been well compensated for it. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is that howsoever they come to be traveling, they have to be accommodated. And we in Barbados, again, we're doing ourselves a disservice because while there are those who like to talk romantic, idealistic stuff about how sweet it is to step out of a plane and feel the warm sunshine and walk down those steps. On a day like this, sir, when it raining from morning, nobody wants to step off that plane and walk down those steps. But more important with respect to the persons with disabilities, it is the worst form of indignity to visit on people, Mr. Speaker, sir, that you have to put them in a wheelchair and lift them up the stairs of the aircraft. And then to correct it, we created No, and I'm being honest, the creativity, and I complimented the folks at Caribbean Aircraft Handling when they took an old flight kitchen truck and transformed it into a lift that was able, I went there and opened up the thing myself and transformed it into a lift that was able to put people in the lift, and then with a greater degree of dignity, you elevate them to the level of what would be a 747 or 777 aircraft. But Mr. Speaker, sir, prior to that, we were lifting people up the step. And it was something of a bygone age, not in a time when on the average coming from North America, coming from Canada, coming from Great Britain, sir, you have 15, 16 passengers that require wheelchair service. So, Mr. Speaker, and in fact, it may well be that people are traveling in that category simply because they can't stand up so long anymore. But, you know, so there are a number of things, sir, that led to that physical situation at Grand Islands Airport being unsatisfactory. There's a second aspect to the rationale, however, Mr. Speaker.
I
sir.
remember, you know, your time starting to evaporate rapidly.
Huh?
Your time is starting to evaporate with a degree of rapidity.
I beg your pardon, sir. I was not aware.
Yeah, that's why I'm making you aware.
My favor, Beverly. Beverly. Indicate how much time we have. Yeah, I didn't. I thought it was unlimited. Okay. No, Mr. Speaker, sir. The economic rationale on this thing was, sir, that we have to recognize that there is a need for us to have an airport where the word I'm looking for, the revenue, sir, starts to drive itself. And this is an absolutely critical part of the problem. Barbados did not have non-aeronautical revenue. Aeronautical revenue, sir, is when you have, you know, you're paying your landing fees and the passenger charges and them type of things. But what the non-aeronautical revenue is about, Mr. Speaker, sir, is making sure that you have commercial activity taking place. And that commercial activity takes place, sir. You're using the empty walls on the airport for advertising purposes. You have, Mr. Speaker, sir, a walk-through experience, like if you're walking through a mall and all of that commercial retail space is occupied. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is where airports around the world are making their money. You don't have no hotel at the airport. The car rental facilities are exceptionally limited and few. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is where the non-aeronautical revenue comes in. The truth of the matter is that if you look at the statistics, you will find that in 2018, Mr. Speaker, Barbados would have had 20% of its revenue come from non-aeronautical services, as opposed to the average across the world, where 50 to 60% of the airport's revenue comes from non-aeronautical sources. And that, Mr. Speaker, sir, means that we were not in a position to do work on the airport in an ongoing way. We were not diversifying the revenue stream. We were only relying, sir, on what the airport's authority had in management had in their accounts, or what they could go and borrow for capital expansion. Whereas, sir, if you diversify your revenue stream, you have more resources from which to draw. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that it was those things that caused us to go to the IFC, and I think the history of going to the IFC was well known. There are a number of issues that arise out of that, but, Mr. Speaker, the first and perhaps the most important one is the public-private partnerships, and I sense that there's a angst in Barbados about where these have existed. They have existed, Mr. Speaker, across the Caribbean. Lyndon Pingling Airport in Bahamas and Grand Bahama as well, public-private partnership. There are at least 3 of them in the Dominican Republic, Mr. Speaker, sir. Norman Manley and Sangster in Jamaica, both public-private partnership. Louis Munoz Marin in Puerto Rico, same thing. Aimé César in Fort-de-France, same thing. They are across the Caribbean. Mr. Speaker, sir, we went through as a government a pre-qualification process which ended in May of 2020, and in August of 2020, 13 pre-qualified bidders were announced. COVID came along, and as an act of God, it impacted obviously the footfalls, it impacted the arrivals at the airport, and it therefore meant, sir, that certain key variables had to be reassessed. We had to think in terms of the fact that we had reduced traffic and therefore reduced traffic flow and footfall through the airport. It also meant, Mr. Speaker, sir, that there was a concern about the timing for full recovery, when or if we would get back to where we were in 2017, 2016, that type of thing. The confidence in global traffic was also an issue, Mr. Speaker, sir. When will tourism and air travel once again be viewed as being safe? Equally, because we do so much air to sea, lack of confidence in the cruise sector equally impacted the use of the airport, because people are not going to treat the Barbados as the place where you're going to do home porting if it is that you're not going to cruise. And then, Mr. Speaker, sir, of course, the issue of the growth path was as projected, was a concern. And it came to a point where we had to give serious thought to the level of investment and the payments that bidders would have been prepared to make. So that the onset of COVID, sir, was a game changer with respect to our plans and our projections. At March of 2020, when we closed, sir, the end of that financial year, the profit at the airport was $8 million. Not a good profit for an airport, but it was a profit. And because if we had been doing the things we need to do in terms of non-revenue, non-aeronautical revenue, we probably would have been doing far better. But it was a profit. At the end of the following year, Mr. Speaker, sir, the airport had recorded a net loss of $43.5 million. Passenger traffic, in fact, moved from 2,204,842. So we were up from the 2.1 million that we found in the year we came into government, sir, and we were at 2,204,000. And it fell off, Mr. Speaker, sir, precipitously to 179,000 people in that following year. Now, Mr. Speaker, it is to the undying credit, I think, of the government that we did not send home any workers. We did not change, Mr. Speaker, sir, anybody's terms of contract, full salary, full working hours. That, sir, was the interest of social stability in this country. But the reality is that the financial model projected had to change. And whereas before COVID, we were being told about the likelihood of a concession fee at 22.5% being paid on the profit share by the concessionaire to Grantley Adams International Airport. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, was then changed to a discussion around 11%, half of what we were talking about. Mr. Speaker, sir, the result would have been that whereas before COVID we would have been thinking about $115.6 million in the first 10 years, that would have been substantially reduced to roughly $50 million in a 10-year period. And then you would ask yourself the obvious question, would it make sense in those straitened circumstances to part with the management of the airport if the return on investment was going to be so minimal? And those are the questions we had to face. For the benefit of the House, sir, I'm going to walk through the COVID scenarios and the modeling so that everybody will understand.
Honourable Member, I don't think you will have that time to go through systematically, as you're saying.
I will not be systematic, sir. I'll be very brief. And it is my fault, sir, because I thought I did not realize the time constraint. But the truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, is that pre-COVID, at year one, we would have been thinking in terms of a projected revenue of 41 million, Mr. Speaker, and a concession fee of 9.4 million. Post-COVID, in year one, we are talking about, or we're thinking that it would be 31 million being earned and a concession fee of 3.4 million. By year three, Mr. Speaker, sir, the projection would have been 44 million pre-COVID and a concession fee of $10 million to the government. Post-COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir, at year three, you're talking about 40 million and a concession fee of $4 million to the government. By year six, Mr. Speaker, sir, you're thinking in terms pre-COVID of $53 million and a concession fee of $12 million going to the government. Mr. Speaker, sir, post-COVID, you're thinking about $48 million being earned with a concession fee of only $5 million. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, it really means reduced income to the government by nearly 50% over the first 10 years, from 22% to 11%. And, Mr. Speaker, in nominal terms, that means that you move from $115 million to $62 million precisely. The reduced investment in the first 5 years of the transaction from $57 million or 80%, sir, so that only minimal capex would have been spent. It would have been, yes, this is IFC. This would have been minimal capex, and it would have meant, sir, that you're just talking about upkeep of the airport, and that was grossly unsatisfactory. To make the IFC proposition even less attractive, the Concorde experience would have been taken out of it after COVID, because there was a feeling that that should not be included in the it was an expense that the bidders would not be interested in undertaking, and equally that bidders would not be interested in undertaking a role in expanding our cargo services, even though the policy of the government, sir, is to make Barbados a cargo hub. Let me say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, that 15.5 million kilograms of cargo annually pass through Grantley Adams Airport. And again, this is an ample opportunity for there to be the management of the airport to play a role in the conversion, the sorting, the packaging, Mr. Speaker, the facilitation of cargo, the handling of it. But the airport only collects a rental fee of $200,000 a year, when we are talking about $4.65 million in cargo business every year. So that, sir, there is clearly evidence that there is, on one hand, an abundance of room for there to be serious commercial effort at the airport, and on the other hand, Mr. Speaker, sir, that we have not seized the opportunities and we would not have capitalized on them had we maintained the approach we were having with the IFC. I think the whole world and his wife now recognizes, sir, that there was wisdom in trying an alternative approach. The financial rules allow for us, in circumstances of urgency and emergency, and a precipitous fall-off in capital is an emergency, sir. Especially if you have no expertise on island, and we have none in the management of the airport, and as we want it to be, sir, that you can go for direct negotiations. We put a college of negotiators in place to lead the direct negotiations, so that it ain't politicians doing the negotiating, it is independent people, all of whom have experience in the business, Mr. Speaker. And, quite frankly, we have come up with the approach which has been offered. The United Arab Emirates, sir, independent of the airport, independent of the government, sir, and its interest in the airport, is a state with whom Barbados is seeking to do business. We opened an embassy in the United Arab Emirates months before we began discussions with them on this matter. Mr. Speaker, sir, not only did we open an embassy with them, we entered into a memorandum of understanding for there to be cooperation state to state in renewable energy, in tourism, Mr. Speaker, sir, in maritime transport. And, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that it is for the United Arab Emirates and for Barbados a natural fit. Because if we want to have true luxury, then, Mr. Speaker, let us understand that long before we start talking about airport business, that we have had from Saudi Arabia, the family of the Crown Prince. We have had from the Gulf a number of the sheiks staying in Barbados, sir, and their families. And it may surprise this country that flatters itself into believing that we know what luxury tourism is, that the takeaway has been that the quality of vehicle, you put a Mercedes-Benz and a Land Rover, and they want a higher quality at their disposal, that what we have here is of a reduced quality. That, Mr. Speaker, sir, Sandy Lane, as wonderful as it is, could be better. And, Mr. Speaker, that is the feedback we get from them. And if, therefore, as part of the partnership, they are now saying that they will help us source luxury hotels, understanding that that part of the world does not lack for money or an appetite for luxury, then with whom should we do business, sir? It baffles me, because we have always looked to the North Atlantic. this talk about who will own and who don't own, the airport is not up for sale and it is never going to be for sale. But management of it, Mr. Speaker, sir, management of it is what we're talking about. But we cannot lose sight of the fact that our precious Sandy Lane is owned by the Irish. So where is the fear of foreign involvement in our tourism coming from? And if we can find partners who are even able to carry us to equal or surpass that level of luxury, Mr. Speaker, sir, why should we not go there with them? Those are the questions that I ask. Now, sir, I want to apologize to you for going over the time. I really did not recognize that, unlike most debates, the first speaker in this one does not have, the rule does not allow for unlimited time, sir. So I want to thank
sure
you
you don't
for
understand that,
I want to
Honourable?
humbly thank you, sir, for your indulgence, and I take my leave of you at this point.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Speaker, sir, if there ever was an evident time that the rules of this honourable House need to be looked at, and a member could yield some of his time to another member who was in full flight and doing an excellent job, that time is now. That time is now. That time is now.
Honourable Member, the time that the Honourable Member had went into other people's time.
I appreciate that you're not
It
taking
al-
it from my time.
Right,
but
but it already went into
understand
other
that.
people's time.
But certainly it is something, as we look at the rules of this honourable House, and I believe in other jurisdictions, you can yield time to other members. And I think that something like that would be a reasonable opportunity. I am told, Mr. Speaker, that the opportunity exists that we could move a resolution to extend the time for the honourable member for St. James Central. And if that is so the mood of the members here, I would like to suggest that we move that resolution. And I wish, Mr. Speaker, to move that resolution and beg your indulgence to speak again.
Wait a second.
The question is that the honourable member be allowed an extension of his time. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm obliged to you. And most importantly to my friend, the honourable member for Christchurch West, sir. And perhaps so that we don't get ourselves tangled in any more knots, sir, if you give me an idea of how much time I now have, I will be able to proceed appropriately.
Continue, Honourable.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so that I want to take you, sir, to the question of the pre-qualification process, because it was at that point, sir, where, as I said, we were confronted with a substantial game changer. And it is very important to recognize that it was only at that point that the COVID situation and the challenges that the COVID situation was going to present for Barbados struck us. The significance of that which the COVID impact, or the significance of the COVID impact which hit this country, sir. Perhaps I rushed through just now. And I would want for the House to fully be able to embrace the change of the lay of the land. Mr. Speaker, sir, it cannot be lightly taken that you enter into a scenario where you're looking at financial modeling in keeping with the very best precepts of financial management, sir, for a country. And you recognize, sir, that some of the things that you want to do, and in fact that you are mandated to do by, for example, the master plan. The master plan is saying that there should be a second level at the airport. But a second level at the airport in circumstances where you're going to see reduced investment interest and therefore reduced profits coming back to the concessionaire, Mr. Speaker, sir. You're seeing, therefore, a lower revenue, and the question will become, should we make this investment in these circumstances? I go back to the pre-COVID and the post-COVID scenarios. If, for example, in year 2, pre-COVID, we are looking at a projected revenue of $44 million. At that time, Mr. Speaker, sir, you were thinking of a concession fee to the government of Barbados of 22%, which would have seen the government making $9.77 million in year 2. But then post-COVID, Mr. Speaker, sir, in year 2, you're looking at a spend of $37 million and a concession fee of 11%, so that the government of Barbados would only see, instead of $9.77 million, only see $4 million. The question arises, how valuable a proposition is it? By the time you got to the end, which would be in the 10th year, you're talking about $59.5 million projected as being the revenue. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the concession fee, if it had remained at 22%, would have seen the government get $13.4 million. But in the post-COVID scenario, that concession fee, sir, would have been $6.3 million as opposed to $13.4 million. Had we gone that way, sir, the critics out there would have said that we give away the money, or give away the opportunity to make money, and give away management of the airport. That is what would have been said. And so therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, it was incumbent upon us to pause and to explore all available options. Because we, sir, have to recognize that the revised traffic forecast as a result of the pandemic caused for dramatic reduction in benefits to the government of Barbados if we had remained in the arrangement with the IFC. I explained before, sir, that the nominal figures would have seen us fall from $115 million, sir, down to $62 million. That would have been a massive decline in profit return. The reduced investment, sir, would have seen the transaction fall by investment in the first 5 years, sir, from $57 million, fall by $57 million or 80%. And as I said to you, sir, that really would only finance minimal upkeep of the airport. The fundamental transformation would not have been able to have been financed, and the people of Barbados, quite rightly so, would have then frowned on this government, frowned on our financial management, and said, well, you hand over the management to the airport to other sources for 30 years, but yet still we have not gone up a second level. Yet still we have not been able to build more capacity in our departure terminal. Yet still we have not been able to build more capacity in our regional terminal. We have not been able to treat properly to the growing needs in terms of air-to-sea transport capacity. What do you have to show for the exercise? And Mr. Speaker, sir, nobody would fault the public of Barbados if they had said that. What we had to do is to make sure that they don't say that. And therefore, sir, that is the reason why we have to make every effort to get the best possible outcome out of the arrangements that were available. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I had indicated just now that there was a parallel with the Harrison's Cave. And I'm going to take time now that I have it to explain to this country, because it is the quality of governance that is at stake here. It is the quality of governance that is at stake here. With Harrison's Cave, Mr. Speaker, sir, a college of negotiators was created, and they went into an arm's length negotiation with those people who were expressing an interest in doing the work at the cave. And Mr. Speaker, sir, they made their determinations based on the needs of the cave. It wasn't the government of Barbados that chose Chukka. It was, sir, the recommendation of the College of Negotiators. And the principle, Mr. Speaker, was to get as good a deal as you could, so as to ensure the expansion of the experience and the improvement of the experience at the cave, while at the same time making sure that all of the necessaries were done in order to improve the day-to-day product management of that installation. It is the same thing with the airport, sir. There is a need for us to recognize that the airport was falling woefully short of the standards that we were expecting. Now, the IFC's recommended investment request from bidders was, as far as we were concerned, pessimistic and was very low. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, we were faced with a choice, a policy choice. Either we are going to abandon the idea of improving the airport, or we're going to defer it for several years. The truth of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, sir, neither of those options was appealing. And I don't think that any right-thinking Barbadian can disagree with the fact that if we are part of a highly competitive global tourism environment, then it is our duty, Mr. Speaker, to make sure that we put this country in the most competitive position that we can put it in. The airport is the first experience and the last experience. In neither instance should it be the worst experience. And therefore, sir, we had to find a way to get this right. The IFC's recommended sharing level was also below the threshold that was being enjoyed by other governments, sir, regionally. As I indicated to you, this is not only a Barbados thing. If you go to Fort-de-France and Aimé Césaire Airport there, or if, Mr. Speaker, sir, you go to Louis Munoz Marin Airport in Puerto Rico, these are concession run and operated. The two airports in Jamaica, same thing. But what are the governments getting? The governments are not getting 11% a year, sir. And if we would be the laughing stock of the Caribbean, let me be very frank with you, Mr. Speaker, that this government should and would have been hounded out of office if we settled for a measly 11%, knowing full well, and I certainly can say as the former Minister of Tourism, that I had every confidence that Barbados would not find it difficult, as we have not found it difficult, to get back in quick time to close to our 2019 record level. And it will be surpassed, Mr. Speaker, sir, because it is one of the most sought after products to be found anywhere in the world. Now, having said that, it is equally true to say that we don't treat ourselves good. And if Barbadians don't realize that service matters and quality of service matters, and that simply being sometimes polite matters, simply sometimes taking time to treat the people, as the Prime Minister likes to say, hear people, see people, and feel what they're going through, their emotion, their difficulties, and relate to them at that level. That matters, Mr. Speaker. But if we don't take time to get that right, we can humbug ourselves. But the truth of the matter is, we, sir, cannot expect that the world is not waiting to eat our lunch. And so therefore, we had to put the product in the most competitive position. And it would certainly not have been satisfactory for us to settle for an 11% when we could do so much better. History has proven us right in that regard. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to speak a little bit to the cargo issues, because research over the last 10 years prior to COVID showed, sir, as I indicated, that Grantley Adams International Airport plays host to 15.5 million kilograms of cargo annually. And Mr. Speaker, if you took time to apply the average air freight rate of $3, sir, per kilogram, you will realize that you come to a figure, sir, of 46.5 million United States dollars, which this country sees in terms of, or can see in terms of revenues generated via the cargo handling business. That we, sir, as a country, have once again, in the same way we treated to the general passenger side of the airport, we treated also, sir, to the cargo side of the airport. That we, sir, feel satisfied and chuffed to know that that volume of business goes through the airport lands. But that the airport is only going to charge rent, sir, and if you take the 46.5 million over a 10-year period, you come to 4.65 million per year. But the airport, sir, the rent only collects rental fees of approximately $200,000 annually. $200,000 in the context of a business which is seeing $4.6 million passing through its hands annually. It does not make sense and does not withstand scrutiny. But again, we have a policy choice, sir. We can either decide to continue to do it that way and then wonder why we do not have the revenue to reinvest in the airport and to expand its capacity and to improve its access to technology, which is another problem. Because issues like incinerator, issues like vehicles and access to vehicles, issues, Mr. Speaker, sir, like the photovoltaic farm and so on and so forth. All these are things, sir, that most airports, sir, are easily able to take in stride and finance and move on. And they should be able to, because you are playing host, sir, to a captive market. People got to travel. But we were not doing that. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, sir, we were not thinking strategically in a commercial way, and we found ourselves being short of revenue. Now, with the IFC option, we went back to them on this question of cargo. Bidders who had been pre-qualified indicated in the immediate post-pandemic phase, or during the pandemic phase, I should say, that they did not have the appetite financially to get involved in cargo because they saw cargo as requiring another investment, yet another investment. How many investments does Barbados want us to make? Quite frankly, we want to have return on our own investment virtually guaranteed in these difficult circumstances. Barbados calling for more. Quite frankly, we feel an appetite to do less and be very, very guarded in where we go and how we get there. Mr. Speaker, sir, there was no appetite for the expenses in cargo, and therefore there's obviously a conflict with the government's ambitions to making this country a logistical hub. So that, sir, we came to a point where we had to deal with something of a policy dilemma. Now, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, for the benefit of this House, that this government made very serious and clear deliberative choices. We prefer to have a build, ownership, and build, operation, and transfer policy. Build, operate, lease, and transfer policy, so that there is an opportunity for us to hold on to the ownership of the airport, while at the same time benefiting from the opportunity to spend or have somebody else spend their money on our airport and give them the return on investment. I hope I made myself clear. We want to hold on to the airport while at the same time benefiting from the opportunity to have somebody else spend their money on our airport give them the opportunity to have a return on their investment, and we benefit, Mr. Speaker, sir, from the improvements and the transformation, the transfer of skills, Mr. Speaker, sir, the transfer of knowledge, because our people will learn new management skills, they will have new experiences operationally, a better understanding, a more modernized understanding of the operations of the airport, sir. That approach, sir, in my judgment, differs fundamentally from the one that was tabled on this side of the House by the last administration in I believe it was a budget speech, Mr. Speaker, when the Minister of Finance indicated that it was his government's policy to have a partial divestment of the airport. In other words, you were going to sell off part of the ownership that you have in the asset. And I don't care how small or how large that divestment is, sir. It differs fundamentally from the approach we are talking about, where we can hold on to the asset in its entirety, but we will invite people in to transfer their knowledge, their skills, Mr. Speaker, sir, to our people, their management expertise to our people, and spend their money and have an opportunity, sir, to walk away with a return on the investment while we hold on to our airport. It is a difference. Now, sir, you can hear that the IFC, we broke ranks with the IFC. I heard that on the radio the other day. And we parted company with the IFC, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have not parted company in any bad blood way. This House needs to know that the Bridgetown Initiative, which has now been adopted by virtually every country in the developing world and the vast majority of the developed world, that Bridgetown Initiative, sir, is a work in process which involves a consultant from the IFC working with the government of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, sir, the IFC is working with the government of Barbados with respect to our renewable energy program to this day. That up in Lamberts, Mr. Speaker, where we want to have wind energy being utilized to the tune of 40 to 50 megawatts, Mr. Speaker, the IFC is helping us design that transaction structure. And equally, the ambition north of Barbados at sea to have wind turbines at sea, Mr. Speaker, sir, because we have no local knowledge, no local talent, no local expertise in that scale of investment or that type of investment on this island. So it isn't a bad blood thing with the IFC. A business decision was taken. The IFC advises. We had a college of negotiators that sat down with them and expressed their concerns. And their concerns made sense. And Mr. Speaker, so the option then is before the government to govern what is the policy decision. And the policy decision we had, Mr. Speaker, sir, and that we took was that we would explore other and alternative arrangements so as to try to get as close as possible to the ambitions we had when we began in 2018. But that we would not sell Barbados short by parting with the management of the airport to get a measly 11% on the investment when the year comes. Not when all across the Caribbean, people getting 20, 22, and 25%. And in fact, what we have now worked out via the MOU with the UAE is 30%. Beginning at 30%. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to say also to this country that there is an abundance of room for us now to open our minds to opportunity. And let us unshackle our minds from this colonially imposed form of mental slavery, where we are full of self-doubt, where we feel that we are lesser lights and unable to stand as equals on the world stage. And as equals, sir, we don't see ourselves as being equal to large powers. and don't see ourselves as being equal enough to say to them, we have opportunities here that you may be interested in. And we have ambitions to go places with partnership with you. And Mr. Speaker said, let us be very real. We shouldn't only be talking about partnership on the development of the airport. We have an oil and gas sector that is crying out for a partnership. It is underdeveloped. We do all the seismic surveys you could want to do, sir. And we know that we have difficult geology, how much ever thousands of feet it is below the sea. Rock formation is awkward and awful. But below that rock formation, Mr. Speaker, sir, there are trains, tracks of gas. And we know that the natural gas is a bridging fuel. And we know, Mr. Speaker, sir, that the whole world is rushing to get its hand on natural gas. And Mr. Speaker, sir, we don't want to have the conversation about how we can find partners that can help us to get where we need to get, to help us, sir, to make sure that we are able to bring down the cost of living in this country, while the whole world is looking for partnerships in order to get, Mr. Speaker, sir, an opportunity to bring down the cost of living in their countries. And Mr. Speaker, the insularity of our thinking, it bothers me. I listened yesterday as I was on my way to a meeting with the representatives of the African Union who are here on a reparation study tour. Did you hear what I said, Mr. Speaker, sir? That they're representatives of the African Union coming to Barbados to study reparations, because Barbados is seen as a leader in the effort, Mr. Speaker, sir. We don't see ourselves as leading nothing, but they came here, sir, to join with us and to learn from us, sir. And you know, sir, as I'm driving in the car, I'm hearing about foreigners playing a role in our economy. And I asked myself the question, was it not only a few short years ago that we turned to Ghana to get nurses to assist us in the time of COVID? Was it not a few short years ago, sir, that we turned to Cuba to get nurses to assist us at the time of Cuba? And they did a fantastic job and saved Barbadian lives, Mr. Speaker. So where then does it come now that we humbug ourselves with this new thinking? 2 years later, we have forgotten. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the foreign ownership of Sandy Lane I talked to you about just now. But I want to say something as well. You know, if an international airport, sir, is managed by a non-Barbadian entity, I don't have any challenge with that, so long as I know it coming back to Barbados when the concession life is over. When the 30 years is over, let it revert back here, which is what can happen. But I asked Barbados from this place, sir, if they've ever heard of one occasion where the United Arab Emirates has issued sanctions against anybody in the world to stop anybody from landing a plane in their country. Because while we like to come down selectively on whosoever we like to come down on, we very often forget that those that we like to love up or hug up and make much of, their behavior towards us very often leaves a lot to be desired. We like to forget those things, Mr. Speaker, sir. You know? So I can only tell you, sir, that I think that there's much that we can do in terms of benefiting. And I spoke just now to the transfer of knowledge and skills, and I want to say to this country as well. When we feel proud about our airport, as we should, because frankly, with all of its faults, it has served us well, let us also recognize the journey that we as a people must take. We need, sir, we need, and we know we need. That's what bothers me. We know we need, but we don't want to say that we know. We need to have service standards emphasized and implemented at our airport. But we know we need service standards. Mr. Speaker, sir, if a flight comes in from Canada, it is a common thing for that flight to have passengers waiting for an hour, 2 hours, while valises put on the ground outside. You know what me say valise? Grips. Grips put on the ground outside, Mr. Speaker, sir. Huh? And a dog marching up and down, sniff, sniff, up and down, sniff, sniff, up and down. Well, why do we do it in that primitive way? Because the amount of money it takes to put in some of the very sophisticated stuff that they use in Miami and that they use in the same Canada and that they use in the United States all through Europe and things. Mr. Speaker, sir, we don't have it at our fingertips. I just passed through an airport, sir, where I saw a machine that was probably as tall as this desk, and at the base of the machine was a imprint that looked like your foot, as though you see like toes and a foot. And I asked the gentleman, what is this about? And he says, so that you don't have to take off your shoes, you stand on that machine. There are very few of them in the world, but we are happy that we have one here. Technology evolving, you know? And as you go on and on and on, so that is now the new thing that will save you from having to take off your shoes. But Mr. Speaker, sir, it comes at cost. And if you want to be first world, and if you want to be with the big boys, and you want to feel the sense of pride that all of us love to feel, then, Mr. Speaker, sir, you're going to make an investment in certain key things. The standards of service that we stand to benefit from by way of having an experienced airport operator being able to implement certain key metrics in terms of the service that we have in the country at the airport is critical. Sir, may I also say that it's not just a question of the baggage handling, it is a question, sir, of what happens with customs and immigration. The standards of service with customs and immigration, sir, have to be improved. It cannot be that it cannot be that you have an expected requirement that there are 9 officers at a desk at any period of time during the day. And one time, sir, you come in and you will find that there are 3. Another time you will find that they got the 9. The next day, sir, you'll find you got 1. And nobody ain't going to give you no explanation. Nobody's going to think. In fact, far from getting an explanation, sir, the line will be long and back up right back to the door, sometimes back onto the apron where the plane park. And if the rain is falling, heaven forbid, sir, you will stop up there till when you go through. And we've accepted this. But it cannot be that we continue to treat to this as though it is the way it ought to be. It is not a good practice, sir. Now, beyond that, sir, it is true to say that there have been 19 going 20 years since the airport has had a major significant capital works investment. And while I hear the concerns, and I have spoken to some of the concerns that we hear from the public, I want the public now to hear the concerns that we have from the clients and the stakeholders who have to do business at the airport, because it is important for the public to understand the plight of those people who have to do business at the airport. And they have to understand as well, sir, that we have to find money in order to be able to advance the business interests of those stakeholders. There is an absence, Mr. Speaker, sir, of maintenance and repair, what would you call it? Maintenance, repair, and overhaul facilities at Grantley Adams Airport. We want to get to the point where flights crossing the Atlantic can choose to land in Barbados and go through repairs, undergo repairs where and when and if necessary. We want to come to that point, Mr. Speaker, sir, but it comes at cost. We want to come to the point, Mr. Speaker, sir, where the gift that we got from Canada, the tower, because all of this thing about foreigners, we forget that the very tower that makes it possible for a plane to land or take off was a gift from a foreign entity. All this talk about foreigners. And Mr. Speaker, sir, the tower today challenges ambient heat, almost unbearable at times. I sit across from the Honourable Member for St. George North. She would know, sir, because I am aware, when I was minister, of the threatened industrial action. I have had to go up there at midnight, sir, in order to restore some sense of calm and balance. I have had to extricate myself from more pleasurable activities, sir, to go to the tower in order to restore a sense of calm and balance. Mr. Speaker, sir, the fact of the matter is that cooling systems are not the best. Let's put it mildly. The fact of the matter is, sir, that even the exit, the emergency exit, is a perilous crawl space. And then heaven help you if you got to come down the external ladder. Huh? There's not a man in here who will want to come down that external ladder. Mr. Speaker, sir, and what we are talking about is the basic fact that the state has to find the resources to make these things happen. Now, if it is that we got to fix the airport in its basic and elementary way, and then look to find the resources on top of that too to fix the tower and replace it, and we got to look to find the resources, Mr. Speaker, sir, to get the overhaul and maintenance facilities, sir. Where does the money come from? And I wonder whether the public pauses to understand these things. And what we will not do, sir, is to stand here as a member of the other government stood and ask the question, well, tell me where to cut. Tell me where to cut it from. I might have cut it from the hospital. I might cut it from education. I might have cut it from public works. That's not our style, Mr. Speaker, sir. We have to find creative solutions for these major problems because these are, and I say again, these are operational issues. That if we as a country don't get these things fixed and get them right, then we as a country will hemorrhage and bleed to death. And Mr. Speaker, sir, there is also the question, sir, of how we marry the airport into the ambitions of the different sectors of this economy. One, as I turn my eye to my right, is the agriculture sector. I see the minister there. The medicinal marijuana, Mr. Speaker, sir, has to be at some point exported from Barbados. It would mean, therefore, sir, that it has to be stored. It got to be transported from point to point in the airport. It got to be facilitated so you can export it. And sir, there are security issues that arise around that, obviously. And again, this comes with more costs. And these are but a few. I could go on ad nauseum, which I will not. These are a few, Mr. Speaker, sir, that indicate to me that Grantley Adams International Airport is in a desperate need, not only of rehabilitative work, sir, if it is to be fit for a purpose, but it is in need, sir, of more developmental effort. And while we can benefit from a partnership that allows for a concessionaire to do the rehabilitative work, sir, it still is going to fall to the government of Barbados to continue march onward with regard to the developmental work that has to be done in that space. Mr. Speaker, I want to say, therefore, that the establishment of the negotiating team to negotiate with the UAE was an inevitable next step when once we had done our assessments as to the state of play with the IFC. As I indicated to you, sir, the mandate of the negotiators was a very simple one. How best do we attain the economic and the social objectives that it was our ambition to reach when we began on this journey shortly after winning the government in 2018 and were interrupted as we were by the COVID pandemic. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, the discussions took place with the United Arab Emirates between September of last year and May of this year. And it was in late last year, perhaps October, November, that the members of the social partnership were advised by the Prime Minister, no less, of the nature of the ambitions we had with the United Arab Emirates. Obviously, there have been non-disclosure arrangements put in place, but it could not prevent us from speaking to the leadership of Labour, especially as workers' rights and workers' interests stand to be impacted by this. Now, Mr. Speaker, sir, again, this was an identical approach to what we used when we dealt with the cave. And I know this because it was me who spoke with the workers on the matter of the cave. And if you doubt that, Mr. Speaker, sir, she who sits immediately across from me, the honourable member for St. George North, would know that we had that conversation. And not only her, she was in the presence of her esteemed former General Secretary, Sir Roy. Now, Mr. Speaker, the agreement details with the UAE from the start of the concession until the pre-COVID passenger threshold is reached, which is the 2019 level, we are going to have a profit split, which will be 70% to the concessionaire and 30% to Grantley Adams International Airport. I don't believe that's a long time, Mr. Speaker. I do not believe that is a long time. In fact, as recently as this morning, the Minister of Tourism was able to announce yet another new flight coming into Barbados, this time from the Cayman Islands. I believe, sir, that we are in the right trajectory. And if we are already approaching 2019 coming out of the United Kingdom, it will not be long before we get to 2019 levels across the board. Mr. Speaker, from the time of reaching the pre-COVID passenger threshold, whenever that is, let's assume it is 2 years from now, then, sir, to the 20th year of the concession, the profit split will be 60% to the concessionaire, 40% to Grantley Adams International Airport. Recall that it was the last thing the IFC was offering us after COVID was 11% across the board. Well, we are talking, sir, that once we get to 2019 levels, we move immediately to a 60-40 split. 40%, Mr. Speaker, sir, to Grantley Adams International Airport, Inc., and 60% to the concessionaire. That is correct. Just under 4 times the amount. Let me say that again. Just under 4 times the amount, Mr. Speaker. So I am baffled as to how this becomes in any way a questionable deal. Financially, sir, there's none that makes more sense, quite frankly. And then, sir, as though that were not enough, in the last 10 years of the life of this concession, it becomes a 50-50 split. And there is nowhere in the IFC plan, sir. In fact, the best that the IFC could have offered us was a 22.5%. So that, sir, it has now surpassed that, substantially surpassed that. Now, the investment, sir, we're talking $300 million, and you may wish to recall, Mr. Speaker, that with the IFC we did not go past $260. We're talking $300 million, and with the IFC we did not go past 200. It was 50 or 260. One or two, $260 million. The concessionaire's undertaking, sir, is that they're going to be looking at attracting and introducing and engaging 5-star international hotel partner operators, sir. And I made the point about the importance of this luxury connection, because we have in this country now to begin to understand that when we're talking about the development of our tourism sector, sir, we've got to put together the dots. The first thing you have to do is recognize it's not just about airlift, but it's about connectivity. The UAE services the entire Persian Gulf. So you're talking about connections, sir, from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. You're talking, Mr. Speaker, sir, about Morocco. You're coming all around, sir. Oman, on and on. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, sir, we are talking about people in all of them countries who are no strangers to tremendous wealth, or whose experience is luxury. And equally, Mr. Speaker, as I've indicated to you, the feedback that we have gotten in the tourism sector, the BTMI and so on, has been that the expectation, the standard expectation they have when they get here and we think that we're telling them and showing them luxury. They're asking it for it to be up that a notch, Skipper, because that ain't quite where we at. And I like the Range Rover. I'm only going to drive in a Range Rover, quite frankly, but that Range Rover is not the model I was expecting. But that's what it's tell you. There's a lovely Mercedes-Benz. We only use Mercedes-Benz, but that is not the model we are expecting. And therefore, sir, we now want to talk about hotels because, again, if the best wishes in the world, what they're offering is a partnership that can enable us to access the very best of brands that the world has to offer. Now, working with the government of Barbados, sir, with respect to airlift was not part of the IFC discussion. Working with the government of Barbados, sir, with respect to cargo was not something that they felt there was any appetite for. And Mr. Speaker, sir, I don't think that we should find it difficult, therefore, to understand how, in that vein, this is a better deal. That's the developmental side. Labor. Well, Mr. Speaker, if there's anything about this that I consider to be exceptionally worthy of embracing, it is the question of labor. First of all, from the government's perspective, let it be known that an example has been set for all who care to follow, all who must follow physically in the aftermath of this, because this government will not always be here. But, sir, when the question arose, long before an MOU signed, labor was notified. Meetings were held with the Barbados Workers' Union, sir, 13th of July, 2023. Meeting was held with the NUPW, I think it was the day before that, or the day after, long before that. Mr. Speaker, sir, Unity, meetings held with them too. Labor, sir, has been taken along in this journey to update the workers, sir, which is a fundamental as far as I'm concerned, and to notify them on the substance of this MOU, and to have approval. And Mr. Speaker, even today, this exercise may seem to some as being an unnecessary effort, but for us, sir, it is a labor of commitment, because we feel that we have to come not only to labor, but to the wider country to say exactly why we are, where we are, and what it is we are about in the name of the people of Barbados, sir. That's what government and governance should be about. Then, as you would have heard in the ministerial statement on Friday night, there is to be no termination of employment of any employee except for a cause or voluntary separation for at least 12 months after the transfer of employment. I heard yesterday, sir, somebody complain about, well, I don't know what that means, when they're going to be the transfer of employment. That sounds like a trick. There's no trick associated with it. I want to say respectfully to this country that we've been taught by the last administration. I call it a Shortian precept. A Shortian precept. That you're encouraged to peep up under yourself and live in doubt all the time because you don't know who to trust. I feel so. But Mr. Speaker, sir, we can be trusted. We have said clearly in a ministerial statement, and we say again, that there will be a transfer of employment between 8 to 12 months after the closure of the transaction. And that taken collectively, it means 8 to 12 months from the close of the transaction, and then for another 12 months, you cannot compound anybody working at the airport. The only separation is if that person decides to voluntarily left the people place, or if there is cause. And you would expect that an employer must always have a right to deal with an employee if there is cause. But that means, sir, that we have a period of 20 to 24 months before any employee at the airport can even begin to think about being affected in terms of their work there. And that there will be no change in the employment terms, conditions, or the acquired rights after the transfer of the employment. So business continues as usual. The proposed concessionaire, sir, is also committing to training and retraining of employees, which I think, sir, all of us would agree is absolutely necessary. But the best part of this deal, sir, the best part of this deal, and what strikes me as more than passing strange, and it may be the only political thing I say in this speech, is that I wonder if it is politically motivated, that the conversation being engendered on the airwaves has not at all, not even a glancing blow has been struck, not even an accidental collision with the issue, Mr. Speaker, sir, of equity participation at the airport. But that stuns me. And why does it stun me? Because the airport has an asset value I am almost 100% sure is around $147 or so million. That's the value of the asset. I might be off by $1 million, give or take. Mr. Speaker, sir, if the government of Barbados put 10% of that into shares for the workers, do you understand, sir, that we are talking about the workers of Barbados for the first time in the history of this country being placed in a situation where a government put $14 to $15 million in their hand directly as shareholders in the entity? That's what we're saying, sir. That is economic enfranchisement in its clearest sense. That is workers' empowerment in its clearest sense. That is people, ordinary people who are the maids, ordinary people who are the baggage handlers, Mr. Speaker, being given a stake in the enterprise that they help keep working. And that, sir, let's strip it away now from all the political froth. That, sir, should be something about which this country should feel a sense of pride. But not a word. It may have been said, because I don't have the time to listen to the calling program all day long, but I have heard nothing. And I would have imagined, sir, that this must be one of the most fundamental aspects of it. What I have heard is some concern about if you Google the Chilean company and if you Google the UAE, you're not finding any history of any background in this matter. No, Mr. Speaker, sir, I want people to understand that I got a thing named trade names. I want you to go to AGUNSA. Agunsa, perhaps it is called, sir. And I want you to look at this is the Chilean partner in the consortium. A concession, this is their history, Mr. Speaker. A concession started in March of 1998 for 300 million United States dollars in Santiago, Chile. In 2003, in January, a concession for 190 million United States dollars in Montego Bay, Jamaica. Mr. Speaker, sir, in January 2007, a concession for 300 million United States dollars, San Andreas, Colombia. So close. But if you are full of impurity in your heart, you don't want to know what truly happened. You want to propagate a gospel of what didn't happen, what couldn't happen, what shouldn't happen. Because, Mr. Speaker, sir, you ain't coming with clean hands. January 2013, $15 million, La Serena, Chile, concession there. January 2010, a concession for $40 million, Punta Arenas in Chile. Did another one, Mr. Speaker, sir, in March 2019, $85 million, Arica in Chile. Their experience, Mr. Speaker, sir, expansion of terminals, expansion of parking aprons, both of which we need, installation of jet bridges, which we also need, building of airline offices, installation of lighting systems on the apron. Well, we just did that a couple years ago because we had to find, as we came into government, the life of the runway had already extended its time. It's supposed to have been there for 16 years. It was going to year 18 when we come into government. And we had to find put an arrangement in place, 40 million United States dollars through the Caribbean Development Bank in order to make sure that planes could land at Grand Liams International Airport. You understand what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker? I promised not to be political, so I will go no further. Improvements of the control towers in some of the jurisdictions I just mentioned, Mr. Speaker. We need that too. They have installed customs, immigration, ground transportation facilities, cargo terminals, which we also need, and build airport hotels. So when the tongues wag, Mr. Speaker, there is the experience of the company. Next thing that I presumed that they would come to is, well, I never hear about them before, so let me hear who does work with, because we're good at that. In my limited knowledge, I know much, but I must contradict and I must criticize, so let me find something else to criticize about. So I went and did the research on the aviation partners, sir. They provided ground handling services for Delta Airlines. Don't know if you've ever heard of Delta Airlines, sir. They provided ground handling services for United Airlines. I don't know if you've heard of United Airlines as well, sir. But I believe the Americans refer to them as legacy carriers. They are among the biggest of the big boys. They provided ground handling services for an airline called Qatar Airways, Mr. Speaker, sir, which is supposed to be one of the best of the world. The premium. And, sir, for Korean Air. Cargo services with business partners with FedEx, DHL, United, Delta, and Qatar Cargo. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I do not know where else I can go and how much more information I could offer to this House. What I can say to you, Mr. Speaker, sir, is that there comes a time when we as Barbadian men and women have to be prepared to bury the political hatchet, even if only for a few seconds, and not in somebody's back. But to bury the political hatchet, Mr. Speaker, sir, and look at this country for what it is, where we're born. This is what part we live. This, for the vast majority of us, is where we will live and where we will die, for we have nowhere else to go. And let us therefore agree to make this the best place we can make it. This particular effort, Mr. Speaker, sir, is by no means complete. There's still another 90 or so days within which some details have to be ironed out. It is an ongoing process. And uncaring or don't care-ish in different government will not have a minister standing here in order to explain at length the totality of the circumstances, as I have done, Mr. Speaker, sir. But we are here, and I am doing this at the request of my political leader and my cabinet colleagues and parliamentary group, with a view, sir, to making sure that we have a full disclosure to the people of Barbados. We want, sir, for our airport to have the best opportunity of being competitive, and in turn for Barbados to have the best opportunity of having an airport that is a shining beacon in this region. Mr. Speaker, sir, if we can get that right, then the first impression of every living soul who crosses the threshold into this country would be a better one. And that in turn, Mr. Speaker, sir, helps us on the journey of improving our hospitality. It also serves a commercial purpose, Mr. Speaker, sir, because we can move this country strategically now. If we build out the cargo capacity that we have the potential of doing, sir, to be a hub situated geographically where we are, connecting us better to Latin America, connecting us better to Africa, Mr. Speaker, sir, connecting us better to the United States of America. Mr. Speaker, sir, and beyond. Mr. Speaker, sir, this is not a flash in the pan exercise. This is a deliberate effort to reposition this country economically and to put us on a footing, sir, where in terms of international transport and in terms of tourism, we can be best in class. And it is to that purpose and that purpose alone that we are committed. I am obliged to you.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West, Standing Order 71. Standing Order 71 allows for suspension of Standing Order 30.1. so that in future, if there is any member who this honorable chamber would wish to go beyond the 30 minutes, all you need to do is utilize Standing Order 71, and that's for suspension of Standing Order 30.1 that will allow the honorable member on his feet to so continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm so guided, and I must say I am extremely happy and proud to have been able to use that opportunity to give the member for St. James Central an opportunity to expound on a topic on which he is well familiar, knows well, and certainly has done this resolution proud. And I must say, as a former Minister of Tourism, together with the member from the other place and the current Minister of Tourism, they have all done an extremely good job to bring this resolution and to bring this whole agreement and deal to where it is today. Because it's not been easy. We had the non-disclosure agreement, and for a long time they operated and were negotiating under a non-disclosure agreement, which they could not explain and expose to people, but they had to get us to the point where we are today. So I am very, very happy. I think the honourable member did an extremely good job in explaining what the resolution is about, and I will take it from a slightly different perspective, as you would imagine that I would. Mr. Speaker, public infrastructure involves transportation, power and energy, water, telecommunications, education, health, and recreation. So it almost covers almost every aspect of life as we enjoy it in this country. Today, Mr. Speaker, I will focus specifically on the transportation aspect of infrastructure and to a lesser extent on the recreational aspect of infrastructure. Transport includes roads, bridges, and sea and airports. You'd be well aware, Mr. Speaker, that in the estimates you heard of the expansions being done at our seaport. But that would only be part of the story. Because in addition to expanding the seaport, concomitant with that must be to expand the airport. And that is what this resolution is essentially about. You know, Mr. Speaker, I stand here, a privileged person, to be able to represent the people of Christchurch West. But before that, Mr. Speaker, I have lived in many countries. I lived in the UK, in Wales, I lived in England, I lived in Dublin, I lived in Canada, and I frequent many, many times the United States of America. And I've come into all of those airports at many various destinations. But nothing, and at no time, Mr. Speaker, warms my heart more than when I'm sitting on the left side of that plane. And that plane is coasting down the west coast of Barbados. And you start by seeing St. Lucie. And you come down and you can pick up Speightstown. And then from Speightstown, you could pick up Whole Town. And then from Whole Town, you pick up the Garrison Savannah on the left. And then the plane makes that bank over to the east. And you start to see the airport coming into view. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, I could pick up my house when I look left. Because I know I could pick up the golf course at Rockley in front of the golf course. I know where the ridge is. And I could pick up one of my houses there. And that gives that special feeling. And when, Mr. Speaker, you feel the wheels come out of the plane, and those wheels eventually touch down, and that newly refurbished runway for $80 million that the honourable member spoke of, and that terminal comes into view, there's nothing that warms the heart more than seeing that terminal and seeing that you are home. No matter wherever in the world you've been to, be it China, be it Japan, Korea. I've never been to Africa, I want to go. But wherever in the world, and that terminal comes into view, in spite of the fact that nothing has been renovated on it for 19 years, in spite of that fact, to see that terminal come into view, you know you are home. Because that is an iconic terminal. But it's more than a terminal for us. It is a place to know we land. We back in the country of our birth. We back in the place where we is we. Where we know everybody and everybody knows us. Where we know every nook and cranny. Where we know from Bosco Bell to Archers, down to Penny Hole, and all the places they're in. Because that terminal is ours. And that terminal will remain ours after this resolution and after this deal. And Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. When you look at that terminal and you see those canvas canopies, many people understand those as canopies there to provide shelter and to provide shade. And when you're in the departure lounge, it also provides light because they allow light to come through. But the third function that a lot of people do not appreciate or anticipate is the reason that those canopies were put there is because it was always envisaged that another floor was to go on top of there. It was always envisaged. And if you were to put a stable roof that would have to be deconstructed and then reconstructed, it wouldn't have made sense. So our forefathers and the designers of Gaia from then knew that the expansion of the airport was obvious and imminent and had to be done as a matter of course. And that is why it was done with a type of roof that was movable. And even although we don't accept that it is. There is cables and stretches holding it down that can be moved, and so amenable to a second floor going on top to be able to expand the airport. Because whether we like it or not, we have to move into the next century. We have to take the airport forward. And yes, I agree with Honourable Member that jet bridges become an essential part of a modern airport. As much as I know the Honourable Member that you spoke of that said that when that door opens and you can feel the heat come through, and what a wonderful feeling it was. Honourable Member, very, very close to my heart and in fact very close to my family. But however, even although that was a time that suited that era, but this is a modern time, and this is a modern era. At that point, today, Mr. Speaker, we have reached that reality of knowing that we have to improve what we have at the Grantley Adams International Airport. Granted, a lot of work still has to be done. A lot of work still has to be done in the finer details as it relates to the staffing, as it relates to exactly what things are going to be done, as it relates to the design of the airport and how it will be designed, how it will function, how it will interrelate within the whole ecosystem that is the Grantley Adams International Airport. I want to salute not only the three ministers of tourism that had oversight over this, but also the board. Because often we forget that without the day-to-day management of the board and the employees there and the College of Negotiators that worked so hard to put all of this together, we would not be here today. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the improvements at the aerodrome there have been phased. We've seen the improvements of the runway. I'm told that the runway can now take an A380, which is the largest plane in commercial use today, what I call the double-decker. It is the double-decker of planes, and the runway can now take that. I don't know if we've ever had one there, but I am aware that the Emirates have several A380s. In fact, I've seen them. I know the Qatar Airlines has an A380 as well. And I would imagine that at some point we will be getting the A380 coming to Barbados. And that would be a wonderful opportunity for this country. So in other words, a plane that can take either double the amount of people or double the amount of first-class seats, one or the other, or both. Opportunities where the opportunity to not only take the greater number of passengers, but greater amounts of cargo as well. This is an opportunity that we could not say no to, Mr. Speaker. And I salute the board for recognizing that the first person that they had negotiations with may not have been the best person and the best person for the times that we now live in. And to have the fortitude and the foresight and the willingness to pause and say, we understand where you are, but we're going to go and see what other opportunities are there. And luckily for us, we've found a better partner that can take us further than the first partner was prepared to do. So, Mr. Speaker, this upgrade, and I'm going to go a little bit into the upgrades, because as I understand it, the upgrade will do several things. It will be the upgrade of mechanical and electrical facilities within the airport. Now, obviously, Mr. Speaker, mechanical facilities within the airport that are 19 and 20 years old need upgrades. Electrical facilities in an airport 19 and 20 years without having one needs upgrade. It is clear. Enclosing the departure hall, the departure and ticketing hall, with an AC component being added as well. Part of the concept of bringing the airport into a modern century and into a modern era. Expansion and reconfiguration of the retail. Mr. Speaker, anybody who travels often, and anybody who travels even in modern times to the first world nations, will tell you that airports of today are malls where planes take off and land from. Airports of today, the opportunities to shop, to buy not only food concessionaires, to buy clothing, to buy electrical apparatus, to buy almost anything that you could find about games. I'm being told handbags. I don't know how much handbags the Honourable Member for St. James Central has to buy and how often, but I'm being told that he often frequents the handbag section. Not a section that I normally look at. Yeah, I remember, Mr. Speaker, once I was at a modern airport, and one of the kids threw away some food and so on my clothing. I had to rush into one of the places and change clothing. All of these things are opportunities that before you'd only think of cigarettes and tobacco, cigarettes and alcohol. Those days are gone. And what we need to do is to build out the concessionaires, and that is exactly what this is going to do. Upgrading of the baggage scanners. Upgrading, I can't say it loud enough. Upgrading of the baggage scanners. The Honourable Member alluded to the problems associated with, in particular, the Canadian flights, Air Canada. And why he would allude to that is because one time when I was standing up for 2 hours trying to reclaim one bag at the airport because it was an Air Canada flight, I called up the Honourable Member and said, man, everybody here complaining and saying they ain't coming back. Because you would anticipate that people will get upset and annoyed having to spend 5 hours on a plane, 30 minutes to clear through immigration, and then 2 hours after the 30 minutes for immigration to spend 2 hours to wait for a bag because of the security considerations. Now, I understand it. I understand it because Canada has completely legalized marijuana, and the opportunity for people to bring in marijuana in their bags is clear and evident. And we have to guard against that. I understand it. But there must be better means of checking the bags, better scanners. And this is what this will do. Waterproofing the roof. Look at there. It is obvious. it is obvious that a modern airport cannot be leaking when the rainfall. And obviously, that is an absolute must. In fact, I think that should be one of the first things that they should do, is to make sure that all the leaks, all the areas where water is coming in to the arrivals hall, departure hall, whatever it may be, must be made waterproof and soundproof. And of course, I spoke about the jet bridges. And it's not exhaustive, but this is where the money will be spent. $300 million. Your member said that the asset value of the airport, $145 million. But just imagine once this deal is inked and everything's been done, that can be $345 million, $445 million. An incredible improvement in the infrastructure, an incredible improvement in an asset that we all need, and it is an absolute must. And why it is a must, Mr. Speaker? It is a must because the airport cannot be a bottleneck to people coming into Barbados. It can't be. And as you drive around Barbados, you would see the investment in tourism is moving at pace. It is. We have the Indigo. We have in St. Peter the Pendry about to start. Very soon, I believe we're going to get the Pearhead development. And we're looking at developments in Whole Town, Royalton. So the number of rooms that we have on offer in this country will be increased. Not to mention the rise of Airbnb and HomeAway and all those others. But they cannot be increasing the number of rooms without increasing two things: airlift and capacity at which we can get people through the airport, in and out, and at the highest level. So this is part of a key that is necessary for our whole improvement of our whole tourism product. And if tourism is our business, Mr. Speaker, and if all of us have to play our part in that business, we all have to understand that improvements in the airport, improvements in airlift, building new hotels and building new rooms is all part of the business that we have to play in. Now, Mr. Speaker, I saw in a place that I can't really quote an article about keeping windows to the sea. And let me make it clear to the people of Barbados. This government is committed to maintaining and even expanding windows to the sea in this country. Committed to and prepared to expand. Because whether you like it or not, Mr. Speaker, most of the fields and most of the places where we are building those types of hotel infrastructures are not greenfield. They're brownfield. So vast majority means knocking down, demolishing a hotel, demolishing a warehouse, whatever it may be, to be able to build there. Because we just don't have access to shoreside land anymore. We don't have the access. Most of it has been built out. So what do we have to do? We have to move hotel infrastructure inland, and then have accesses to the beach that people can transfer from the hotel facility over to the beach land. This is not unfamiliar, Mr. Speaker. Rockley Resort had a Rockley Beach Club for years, where people used to transfer from the hotel side over to the beach side. Royal Westmoreland has a beach facility too, where people transfer from the land side over to the hotel side. And let me be clear, Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. We are a little spoiled in this country because to us, being by the beach means that you can literally walk out onto the sand. I lived in countries, Mr. Speaker, when going to the beach may have to drive 50 miles though. And the people that come here understand that going to the beach does not always mean walk out of your room and walk onto sand. A lot of them know and recognize that it may mean taking a short trip, a mile, half mile, 3/4, whatever, down the road. For them, that is still by the beach, though. Still by the beach. And we have to get our minds around it and understand that as we continue to develop as a country and as a nation, we have to start thinking outside of the box. Start putting away the norms. start saying, let us try this, let us try that. You know, Mr. Speaker, I always say to my work colleagues, and I always say to the people at planning, Thomas Edison tried 9,000 times to make a light bulb. 9,000 times. And somebody once asked him, how do you feel about those 9,000 failures? Thomas Edison said, what failures? There were successes at proving what did not work. They were not failures. You learn from your failures. You learn from what did not work, and you use that experience to find what works. And that's what Thomas Edison did. That's what Thomas Edison did. And that is what we have to learn from. Mr. Speaker, what we have to do in this country is to recognize that airports must move with the future. And this is an investment for future generations. How many people remember Sewell Airport? How many people remember what Sewell Airport was like? I remember, Mr. Speaker, when you were traveling at the times of Sewell Airport. First thing, it was an outing for the whole family. It was an outing for the whole family. You would put on your suit or your shirt and tie and so on because you were the person traveling. It would be the Sunday best. That's the first thing. Then the family would deposit you at the airport and everybody would go and park. And they would park by where the canteen was. And well, everybody would accompany you to the ticketing place. Everybody would stand up, make sure that you got your ticket. You went through. They would go upstairs. And the upstairs was important because everybody wanted to make sure you get on that plane and that plane take off. But the most important thing was when you got up the stairs, you had to look back. And you had to wave to the patio to make sure that everybody saw it was you and you were the person getting on that plane. Today, Mr. Speaker, you're lucky if somebody dropped you off. As soon as you get out, they say thanks, bye, and then go on, and you got to try and find your way to get check-in and get up on that plane. You don't see them ever after that again. Because things change. Eras change. And I ain't talking about what people wear to get on a plane now. Because sometimes I remark, you know, it's a different time. It's a different. The only thing I have not seen is a bikini. But I have seen some of all kinds of things people wear to travel these days. I try not to do that. I like my jacket because I find sometimes the planes get a little cold, and I like my arms covered, and I like to travel in my jacket. But that's just me. But what we have to understand is with time, things change. With time, requirements change. With time, the requirement for an improved facility has changed. I also looked, Mr. Speaker, as the Honourable Member went through, at what the contractor had done. I believe the contractor was supposed to be Acorn. And I found that they had actually recently done the airport in Bermuda, the L.F. Wade International Airport. So I took the opportunity to call one of my friends in Bermuda to ask her, a colleague that went to university with me, to ask her exactly how they were able to do the airport and what they were able to do to enhance the airport facilities at the Wade International in Bermuda. And she said that everybody in Bermuda, although skeptical at the beginning, because you understand this airport was done and finished at the time of COVID. So it was an airport that was completed but couldn't see any passengers because of COVID. But since the airport has opened, the people of Bermuda are very, very happy with what has been done by the contractor there. They have improved facilities, improved concessionaires, faster clearing of bags, faster immigration and customs, a better facility, a better controlled climate and clean operation, better facilities for the planes to land, and in all an upgrade and an upliftment of the whole environment in Bermuda. And by all accounts, they are very pleased and very content. She didn't understand or know what the financials were, and I understand that. I didn't expect that she would know that. But in terms of customer experience, they were all happy and impressed. And if we can see a similar improvement here, then that is something that we would want to encourage. Mr. Speaker, I must say that I have not yet seen the planning application. I saw that is coming. But I would like to, from this place, to implore the designers that although we want a modern airport, we still want to keep the character that is the Grantley Adams International Airport. I think keeping that character, keeping that iconic design with those types of canopies that not really seen many places in the world is something that we might want to preserve, and I would encourage them to do that. Mr. Speaker, I want to speak a little bit about the 3 Ps, public-private partnership. And let me say that I am in full agreement with this resolution, full and complete. Because what this, as I see this MOU moving then to contractual arrangement brings, is it brings what I call a transfer of risk. A transfer of risk. And what does that mean? That means that the financing is not on the balance sheet of this country. A $300 million loan in a time when we have limited debt space would have been a problem for this country. So rather than having an impact on our debt space, this is a model where an investor brings his own financing and removes that risk from the people of Barbados. The transfer of risk for design and construction is also removed from the people of Barbados, which means that the concessionaire now has to bring the design, do the construction, oversee the construction, get it through all the planning processes, get it through all of the various regulatory agencies, and bring it to completion. Maintenance and operation, and the risks thereof. Whether we like it or not, when you bring in new equipment, when you bring in new facilities, you take a risk in not only installing it, but maintaining it and keeping it going and functional. All of these things. The concessionaire is transferring and taking over those risks. But of course, you would expect that they need a return on investment. Nobody's going to come and put up their $300 million without knowing that the return on investment isn't there. And another thing that the Honourable Member didn't say, but I'm going to say, for somebody from over and away to come and put $300 million in our airport is a great sign of confidence in the people of Barbados. Well, when it's done, put down, they can't pick it up and carry it back no way. They can't. It remains here. It remains here for the use of us and for the use of visitors that come to our shores. And if that is not showing confidence in our nation, and confidence in our government, and confidence in our Prime Minister, then what is? Then what is? 300 million don't walk boat, Mr. Speaker. It don't walk boat. And that is what we have to recognize is important. Mr. Speaker, this is a tremendously good deal. It's a tremendously good deal not only from the financial returns. It's a tremendously good deal because we added value in cargo. You remember spoke about how much cargo is currently doing. But imagine if the airlift goes up 2 or 3-fold. That means cargo goes up 2 or 3-fold as well. The opportunities for having other hotels of a higher level and quality and standard that this strategic partner brings to the table is something that we have to encourage. This is a tremendous opportunity. And this will go down as a historic change in how we are doing business in Barbados. This will go down as seeing Barbados pivot and pivot in the right direction to understanding that we have to open our minds. We have to open our investment opportunities. We have to open opportunities for our staff and for our workers. Because without the critical and important staff, you ain't got an airport though. You ain't got an airport. You know how many times in my previous job, I got to work and there was no receptionist and no nurse. I said, right, can't see patients, I'm going home. No. Because if you are going to operate at the highest level and the highest standard, you have to have the greatest and best support. You have to have the right staff. You have to not only have the right staff, you have to compensate your staff well. And an opportunity for people to become part owners and to hold something in an SPV and to hold shares is an opportunity above all. And an opportunity that the people that work at the airport should relish and understand that this is something that they should cherish. Something that can be passed from generation to generation, that will have a definite benefit for them. And at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, whether you like it or not, we are here to be able to provide better for the people of Barbados. That's the only reason. That's the only reason. That's why I get up every day and get a shower and put on deodorant and put on clothes and things, go to office to make sure that the people of Barbados can do better every single day. That their lot improves. That whenever I leave this office, that I could say, I look back and say, I did something to improve the lives of the people of Barbados. I did something to improve the lives of the people of Christchurch West. I did something to improve the education opportunities, to improve the investment opportunities, to improve the employment opportunities. Because that is why we do this job. All of us in here, we make sacrifices. Some large, some small. Some days good, some days not so good. But sacrifices nonetheless. Because at the end of the day, we want to live in a better Barbados. And the only way to do that is to make Barbados better for all of us. And that is what this improvement to the airport will do. It will go that way to making Barbados better. Mr. Speaker, I fully support this resolution. I fully support all that has been said. And I look forward to it coming to completion. And I look forward to the day that when we come down that West Coast, bank left, and see that new terminal, it will be a new, improved, much functioning, better functioning, one I could continue to be proud of and increase my pride in the Grantley Adams International Airport. I'm obliged.
Honourable Member St. James South.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. And let me congratulate the honourable members who've spoken so eloquently, because we know that in the public space, sometimes there's misunderstanding about what we're doing. And the truth is, sir, you can't really blame Barbadians, because this government is doing so many things, and sometimes people can't really follow the connections between things. And then sometimes when people don't know, they make up reasons. They make up why you've done X, Y, and Z. And for those who may sometimes be concerned, it may be deemed negative. Some people who want to create mischief, they may make it doubly negative. But I'm truly pleased that Barbados is making this move with the airport. As you heard shared by the honourable member for St. James Central, as he laid out the importance of Barbados having an airport that provides the types of services, the types of the efficiency, etc. How critical that is for us to building our tourism product. It is important for Barbadians to understand how this is going to be able to help us going forward in the future. What I want to do, sir, first of all, is to explain to Barbadians that across the world, the entire economic foundations on which we operated on before COVID have shifted. It has changed. And what has occurred is that countries across the world are now seeking to reposition, seeking to connect in new and different ways, looking at the opportunities that are going to emerge on the economic platform and trying to position themselves to be able to get it. Sir, this is akin to sometimes when we as ordinary citizens scrambling to get a seat in a bus. If you see school children trying to get a seat in a bus, or you're trying to get an overhead bin in a plane, that countries are moving at top speed trying to reposition. And this is one of the reasons why Barbados is moving in the way that it is. Because we have to reposition the Barbadian economy, and to be able to do that, we have to be aware of what the new environment is providing, understand what are the assets or the opportunities that are presented within Barbados that we can effectively use to produce a new economic model to take Barbados forward. Because it's a new environment and everything is changing, it is absolutely important for Barbados to be present when the discussions are taking place. I am so pleased that the UAE has an interest in Barbados and investing in this airport. But I will tell you, sir, that that would not have happened if Barbados had stayed home, because there was nobody up in the UAE thinking to themselves, oh my goodness, why don't we go and invest some money in Barbados? It doesn't happen that way. You have to go there, you have to be a part of the meetings, you have to meet the necessary people, set up those linkages, and then you have to act on those things to be able to bring it home and translate it now into meaningful benefits for Barbados. And that's one of the reasons why ministers have to travel so frequently, because they have to go there to secure the resources and the opportunities that will build the new Barbadian economy to help us to go forward. So the question is, what is the position that this new airport is going to give us that will help us in terms of our economic development? Other speakers have spoken about some of the things, how it will help us with tourism, etc. One of the things, however, that I recognize is going to be key and critical for us is the fact that Barbados wants to be a logistical hub. We want to be the spot in the Caribbean where people come and transfer, whether it's goods or people, to go on maybe to Latin America or to go on to Ghana or West Africa. These are some of the reasons why it would be important, if we're going to be a logistical hub, there has to be major investment in both our ports and our airport. And what the honourable members have shared to us this morning was to indicate that this investment is here. Now, why do we need an airport that is at the level that we anticipate that the UAE could provide for us? Because at 300 million, the type of upgrade that they're going to be able to bring is going to be important to build us the type of airport that can command the admiration of people around the world. One of the most important things is the grading of our airport, and it would be important for us to be able to be at the top class end of airports. This will make us acceptable to a number of countries and a number of carriers to be able to use our airport as the place that they can safely send their planes to land. But more importantly, and this was pointed out by the Honourable Member for St. James Central, when people get off of that plane, the experience that they have at the airport is important. Now, a lot of travelers have moved away from the notion of, they often try to find where they can get a direct flight, that they don't have to change planes. But as yet, we've not been able to cover the globe in such a way that we can make that happen. So people who may want to come from Europe, people who may want to come from Africa, whatever, they want to get to Latin America, it might be critical for them to use Barbados as the logistical hub at which they make that transfer onto a new plane and complete the journey. Now, if you know anything about the UAE and those Middle Eastern countries that have the oil wealth, when you look at their airports, when you look at their planes, these are top class. These facilities are out of this world. The other airlines cannot begin to match up to how the Middle East actually produces its planes and its airports, etc. So just imagine if Barbados were to have that type of airport located here in this country, it would provide for travelers all over the world, especially the moneyed class, with an airport that they would be happy and comfortable to come to and to come with. Now, once we can achieve that position as a logistical hub, what that means is that business will attract more business. We have been working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade looking at the nearshoring program that we believe Barbados can actually get some benefit of some relocation of businesses from other places to come do nearshoring or friendshoring, as they call it. And in doing some investigation, one of the things they said, I was pointing out that Barbados has a lot of attributes that would really make it attractive to people. They said to me, Minister, that is not what is the most important thing. They said the most important thing is to have other like companies who have transferred to your jurisdiction, have had a positive experience, and they are sharing with others that positive experience. They say that is what puts a location high up on a list when it comes to nearshoring. This is what the investment of a UAE investing in the airport in Barbados to take the Barbadian airport experience to a top-class level will do. You will have evidence that there is someone who has invested in this country, found this investment to be profitable for them, and that they can act as a witness confirming that Barbados is a place that is ready for business and ready to do business, especially if the airport is extremely efficient. If the airport is able to do what it is supposed to do in a way that makes the passengers comfortable, makes the processes easy, allows the airlines to land and get off as quickly as possible, that there's a high level of efficiency, it speaks well of Barbados. It says Barbados is ready to do business. Barbados is ready to do business. And this is why Barbadians, wherever you are, should welcome with open arms this type of investment, because it will give the testimony that Barbados is ready for business, and it will take that UAE investor, will bring other investors with them as well, to be able to invest in other parts of the Barbadian economy that will give us the financing that we urgently need to be able to transform Barbados, that we can secure our seat on the global economic plane and be comfortable on the ride. We have to be able to get on that journey. And this is what this will do. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, officers and missions work really hard in identifying opportunities, identifying and working with the various agencies, whether it's Invest Barbados or Export Barbados, to secure business leads, to secure technical cooperation investment leads. And I've just returned from the OACPS ministerial meeting in Brussels. And just to show you how things link together, that one of the things that we discussed at the OACPS ministerial meeting was the importance of resource mobilization to be able to get investment to transform. And the OACPS decided that one of the things that they want to do is to involve the Gulf states, build out cooperation and MOUs with the Gulf states to be able to start that process for all 79 countries that are a part of the OACPS. What this means is that Barbados is out of the box early, that we have been proactive, that we have seized the moment and sought to help ourselves to secure the necessary investment which will help us to move this economy forward. The other thing that is important, I mentioned that we're interested in Africa, said that we're interested in Latin America. But we are not the only ones who are interested in these places. Wherever we go, engaging countries, all of the countries are speaking and demonstrating about their interest in shifting to a greater South-South collaboration, because they see this as the means by which they're going to be able to get a new level of investment and a new level of wealth. So there's that tremendous interest. This is why I believe Barbados has sought to identify what are some of the ways that we can participate and benefit from the interest that people have in terms of looking for new countries to do things with. And therefore, I believe that Barbados positioning itself with a better airport, an upgraded airport by a top-class investor to be able to present Barbados as a shining diamond for business, as those other members of their community in the UAE seek to come to Latin America and other places, because everybody's looking for investment right now. As they pass through Barbados, I believe that it will pique their interest to also look at Barbados as a possible place for their dollars. So I believe this is an important first step. I want to commend the Honourable Member for St. Michael West Central as the Minister of Tourism. I want to commend the Honourable Member for St. James Central and the Honourable Member for Christchurch West for having shared with the country what is the importance of what we are doing. And my simple word to Barbadians is this: fear not. This is a good move on the part of the government on behalf of Barbadians. And what we need to do is to continue to follow as this process continues, to stay engaged, get the facts. Don't let people tie up your minds with speculations and so on, when in some cases they may not know, and they may be alarming you for no good reason. I also want to encourage Barbadians to be alert for the opportunities that may present themselves for them to be engaged in some of these investments that may come along, and therefore start to prepare themselves that when this investment comes, what are some of the opportunities that they could engage in? If they're too small, can they work in a cooperative and be able to present themselves as persons who can be part of the supplier group for the airport, an expanded airport? If there's something novel, new, interesting that they could add to the experience at the airport, to be able to start working on it and to be able to present it, this will help to make the experience different from other places where you've gone to. There are many things, if people sit and think about it, that they could participate in. We are hopeful and want to work towards ensuring that the ordinary Barbadian gets the opportunity to be part of what is happening in terms of the opportunity for retail at the airport, because the more people who come through, the more wealth and prosperity will flow down to the retailers and flow out into our wider economy. So I just want to encourage Barbadians with those few words. We need to support this and keep listening out for that additional information so that they may have the comfort that this government is doing what is in their best interest. I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, no problem. No, it's good. Honorable Prime Minister.
A long, long journey, sir. And that journey has meant that things that would have normally been completed 2-3 years ago have now still to be completed. And I think that all of us know that perhaps one of the greatest victims of the COVID pandemic was in fact the Grantley Adams International Airport, whose revenue went virtually down to nothing, and who went from a profit, I believe, of just over $8 million to a loss of $43.5 million, which the central government had then to support. But let me give it context, because even when the airport was making a profit of $8 million, and I think you heard from the senior minister, the honourable member for St. James Central this morning, because he was the line minister at the time, we knew that there were issues related to our level of compliance with the International Civil Aviation Organization that would have put us in a difficult position. Indeed, he requested of the Ministry of Gaia Inc. for them to spend money to accommodate the air-to-sea passengers, because when we literally came to office, there was nowhere for them to be accommodated. And that long room at the end of gate 13, I believe it is, was then refurbished in order to be able to allow us just to even keep up to date with our commitments with the air-to-sea passengers in the home porting in the cruise industry, particularly in what has come to be known as the winter season. So, Mr. Speaker, we started off knowing that we had issues. I would have met along with the Ministry of Civil Aviation, with the employees of the airport, not in one meeting, but in 2 meetings, to be able to explain why we are likely to have to go into a process that would mean us having to find some kind of support and or partnership in order to meet our obligations. And I want to be very clear. The government has a limited pool of funds once we were in a program to restructure debt and to bring down our debt. And part of the deal for the restructuring of the debt meant that we have to put our debt on a downward trajectory. It means that you have limited space to spend or to incur new debt. And therefore, the questions had to be asked: what is essential, what is highly desirable, and what is optional? Indeed, I believe only recently someone made reference to that process in the last week. And that process was to involve Barbadians, so it was not just those of us in the Parliament taking the decision, but the wider population, recognizing that we could not be all things to all people, that we could not do everything that was required of us. And Mr. Speaker, it made us aware of the things that we absolutely have to take control of in this country. We knew that there could be no devolution of security. No devolving security to a non-state actor. We knew that there could be no devolving law enforcement. And that included not just police, but customs and immigration as part of your border security for the country. We knew that we would have the primary obligation, not the singular, but the primary obligation with respect to health care. And we knew, sir, that we would also have the primary obligation, not singular again, with respect to the provision of educational services. Indeed, at the same time as we were doing that, as we came in, you would recall that within a matter of weeks, we reinstated the policy of paying for tertiary education for all Barbadian students. That had been removed for 5 years. And that, in and of itself alone, is a significant amount of money. Mr. Speaker, I give you all of this as context because the other thing that we knew was that the previous government, in a budget speech, had announced that they would be divesting a percentage of the ownership of the Grantley Adams International Airport. In fairness to them, they said a minority stake, but they never said how much under 50%. And our concern at the time was that it was likely to be unattractive because people were not likely to come in if they didn't have control in terms of the ownership. And we felt that if it was ownership that you were putting on the table, you would be forced into an issue of having to devolve and to give up majority ownership. Our government was very clear that we were not divesting ownership of the airport or the seaport, but that what we would do would be to ensure that we could have the awarding of a concession that carries with it other obligations, but only for a time period. And that mechanism, once crafted, would leave ownership in the hands of the people of this nation predominantly. And secondly, would allow us to benefit from investment into the infrastructure and operations of the airport. And because people were investing and it wasn't just a straight loan, that they would also be bringing management and a wider range of networks and contacts to be able to increase the volume of traffic, both for passengers and now, as we have said here, for cargo. But in addition to that, Mr. Speaker, looking at other value-added revenue opportunities for the airport, because we know that the airport in most countries is a mall. The airport in most countries is also somewhere where people go and buy stuff. And things that they may otherwise buy in the country, they may choose to buy on arrival or on departure. And therefore, there are some that even have airports looking like a park, a place of relaxation and recreation. We see them with all of these chairs now that you pay for the massages and the different things that people have. There's so many different ways to make money in an airport. And we felt that the Grantley Adams International Airport was not exploiting all of the opportunities, but we recognize that in some instances it would require further investment in order to be able to have that level of revenue, new revenue. But to make that further investment, do we buy equipment for the Ministry of Public Works, the $10 million that we gave them, or do we put it in the airport? Do we buy buses so that people could get home on time Or do we put it in the airport? Do we fix schools, many of which had not been fixed for a number of years? Or do we put it in the airport? Do we build a new accident and emergency, as we did? Or do we put it in the airport? And thank God, we bought the trucks, and we bought the buses, and we built the new A&E, and we gave the 5% salary increase that could have gone towards the airport. The point is, Mr. Speaker, this is no different from any other household. You have choices and you have consequences. And there are some things that may be better done by a third party that still gives you the benefit. Barbados needs an international airport, and Barbados wants an international airport of excellence. We need an international airport, and we want one that is a beacon of excellence in the Americas. But for us to move from the need to the want may require someone else to help us do the heavy lifting. And therein lies the first part of why we took the decisions that we took. The second part related, as I said, to the question that we did not want to divest ownership, but we found a creative way to do that which we are doing, bringing us and yielding us the same benefits, and leaving for the children of the people in this country and their grandchildren the opportunity to be able to leverage the asset again in 30 years' time, rather than an outright sale, which would mean that punto final, done. Nothing more coming back to you. And Mr. Speaker, that has been the difference in many instances with the leadership we believe that this government has brought to the table with respect to the assets of this country. Sir, we entered a process that we thought would work for us. And we approached the International Financial Corporation, which is an arm of the World Bank, and indeed, they brought significant expertise to the table, and they helped us work out a number of issues that, quite frankly, on our own, might have been challenging and complex for us to work out on our own. So I thank the IFC for the technical side and the work that they did. I think the ministers who have been involved at different levels and different times would also agree that the International Financial Corporation helped us to better understand the parameters of what was at stake, what we were doing, and that is why at the end of the day, even when we left the IFC, we had no difficulty in paying for the technical assistance which was effectively rendered by them during the course of this thing. We always knew we would have to pay, and we would either pay then on our own or pay at the end when the transaction was completed. And Mr. Speaker, that has allowed us to reach this stage. When COVID hit, all of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, the deal changed. The guidance to the deal changed, because IFC was effectively providing the guidance. And all of a sudden, Mr. Speaker, what was supposed to be $252 million in mandatory capital expenditure for the first 4 years, and in the first 4 years, 117 million out of the 252 went to a different amount. The amount in the first 4 years would have remained the same, but what would have changed are different aspects of the capital expenditure. They said no jet bridges. They said all of a sudden that the Concorde would not be included. They said, Mr. Speaker, that instead of paying a concession fee of 22.5% with no upfront fee over the period of the life of the project, that they would now all of a sudden be paying 11% for the first 4 years and 13.6% thereafter, but that there would be a capital fee of upfront fee of 24 million. We argued with them for well over a year, 18 months. And we told them this simply was not working for us. We indicated that even if you accept, as was the case, that COVID hit us hard, that we believe that there would be a post-COVID scenario, and that therefore, to move only from 11% to 13.6% in revenue post-COVID would be to give away the airport. And we said no. We said no. And we used the opportunity to be able to start to see what else would happen. At the same time, we had discussions with the United Arab Emirates towards signing a framework agreement. And also, there was a parallel interest on the part of an entity out of there to be able to work with us. I want to pause here, sir, because there is a belief that the only legal form of procurement is competitive bidding. When direct negotiation, where there is an emergency, where there is specialized services, and generally, where the environment is not conducive to the provision of the particular service, you are admitted to go to cabinet or to go to the board. In this case, it is a board, to be able to make the determination as to what is in the best interest to deliver the service. Because procurement is effectively about process, but the service is about destination. And in those circumstances, we were very clear as a government, as the sole shareholder of the Grantley Adams International Airport, that this would only make sense if there was appreciably better terms than that which were being offered under the guidance of the IFC. And Mr. Speaker, that was our position then, it is our position now. We would have also started to consult with broader members and to indicate to the social partnership as far back as 7, 8 months ago, this July, probably 8, 9 months ago, that we had this offer on the table, that we could not speak to it definitively, but that the government was, as sole shareholder of Gaia Inc., supportive of the matter being pursued. Mr. Speaker, in addition to letting the members of the social partnership know, I should perhaps go back and say that prior to the decision to break with the IFC, the board of the Grantley Adams International Airport asked whether there was a willingness to move beyond passenger services and to include cargo and broader tourism services. And they were told a flat no. So here you have a situation where what was being done was not equal to the task of the level of remuneration all of a sudden, and secondly, was not equal either to the scope of services that were being requested on the part of the Grantley Adams Airport. What we have finally received as guidance in this MOU is a revenue share of 30% until 2019 passenger levels are achieved, 40% once we get 2019 passenger levels, and 50% in the last 10 years of a 30-year concession. What we have also received from them is a commitment that there will be inclusive in the program, the jet bridges again, the passenger bridges as they're called, and that would be included in expenditure of a minimum of 300 million Barbados dollars. And you will have to know that that is indicative, sir, because the reality is that when the time comes for the quantity surveyors to do their work and all of that, it may well be more, particularly in the environment in which we are living now, where because of the disruption supply, there has been an inflationary impact on a lot of the construction materials and equipment that we're talking about, sir. In addition to that, we recognize that there are various aspects of the equipment and various aspects of the expansion and the refurbishment that would allow for us to be able to deal with our obligations, our compliance with ICAO regulations, and therefore we believe on the face of it that this opportunity is a good deal. The consortium between UAE and Chile reflects a level of expertise so that we're not dealing with people who are now coming to this for the first time, but they have had experience in this area. And Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, the government has been very clear from that very first set of meetings with the workers at the airport that if there was to be divestment of any type whatsoever, it would be divestment in the interests of the workers of this country and in the interests of our national insurance scheme and social security scheme. And Mr. Speaker, this government has kept faithful with those commitments. We are in the process of discussions and negotiations with the workers' representatives, and they will then help us determine where we ensure that our commitment to economic enfranchisement is not just simply a buzzword, but it is actual reality. The Honourable Member for St. James Central and Senior Minister spoke about our example with the caves of Barbados. And the member for Christchurch South, I believe, is the chairman of that company and can equally speak about this government's commitment to economic enfranchisement and also to what it is to be able to find a partner that allows us to be able to have an appreciably better asset in circumstances when the money in your pocket thin, when you just don't have it because you've got to spend it on education or health or police or customs or other agencies that are critical to keep this country stable. And Mr. Speaker, if this government was not interested in being fully transparent on this issue, we would not even be having this debate here, as we will with the Mass Transit Authority, as we will on Friday with the pensions reform, as we will with the issue of Barbados Agricultural Management Company and their restructuring, as we will with the Caribbean Broadcasting Corporation when the time comes for that, and as we will with the UDC, RDC going into the NDC when the time comes, National Development Commission. No, sorry to use the acronyms, Mr. Speaker, when the time comes for that. And why? Because we are simply stewards for a time. We are simply stewards for a time. And what is done in the offices of government must equally be capable of being shown in the light of day in the Parliament and in the country. And that is the mechanism we have chosen to be able to use in order to keep the country au fait, up to date with all that we are doing. As I said, what the exact divestment of equity will be in the company, I'm not at liberty to say because the Gaia Inc. now has to do the negotiations with the workers' representatives, but I have every confidence that both sides will act in good faith and that the workers at the airport, as well as the workers, and listen to me carefully, who service the airport. Now, they may have a different set of arrangements because in some instances people are deployed and sent back down, and therefore we may have to deal with the broader agencies of customs, immigration, police, civil aviation through special purpose vehicles that may hold shares, and then they work out how best those shares are to be benefiting ultimately the workforce of that particular agency that services. So we're not only seeing the workers of the airport, we're seeing the workers who service the airport. And I believe that the minister is committed to having a town hall meeting with the workers and with the general public so that these issues can be further given expression to. Mr. Speaker, this is not the end of the transaction. And I know it may be difficult for some to appreciate and understand that, but this is the basis of an MOU that is allowing us to move to the next level. And once the next level is completed within the next 90 to 120 days, and that there is legal closure, then everything starts. What we have also agreed to, as was said in here, that during the period of the transition and going on to the restructuring, that following discussions, we've agreed that basically you would have a situation where effectively for 2 years, the only people who will not be at the airport are people who are losing their job for cause, and we all know what for cause means, that they did something egregious, something of a serious nature that would cause dismissal, and not every infraction causes that. We all know that. And secondly, those who want voluntary separation for whatever reason. Somebody may have to go overseas to take care of their family. The family predominantly lives overseas. They want to leave. They want to enter into a voluntary separation package. And the government, and I believe the concessionaire, may be open to those kinds of things at the appropriate time. But as I said, that then depends on the negotiations between the unions and indeed Gaia Inc. at that point in time. Mr. Speaker, we had a negotiating committee, a college of negotiators at all levels, and we will continue. Indeed, as we go into this deeper period now of due diligence and greater fine detail, we will be adding even to the committee that we had, which the Honourable Minister of Civil Aviation would have adverted to in his ministerial statement on Friday night. Suffice it to say, Mr. Speaker, this government believes that we are acting in the interests of the people of this nation. This government believes we're acting in the interests of the workers of Gaia Inc. and the workers who service Gaia Inc., the distinction being made by those who are direct employees and those who belong to agencies but whose day-to-day experience is on the physical locale of the Grantley Adams Airport. This government believes that this will allow us also to pursue other things with greater vigor, and some of them I am not at liberty to speak to yet, but suffice it to say that Barbados needs greater competitiveness for our airport in terms of how we relate in particular to the North American market. And we are working on that, and in the fullness of time, I'll speak in greater detail about what that is and why this helps us in this respect. This allows us to pick back up the issue of cargo. There was a time, sir, when flowers and perishables used to come from South America and be transshipped through Barbados to go on to Europe and to North America. All of that business was lost before we came into office, sir. We want back some of that business because we believe that Barbados is a logistics hub. It has been, regrettably, for 4 centuries, for the wrong reasons, for 3 of those 4 centuries. And we need now to make it work for us for the right reasons. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at what we've been talking about with the mission economy, we are committed to using our geography to allow us to be able to earn for our people beyond the size that we have physically. If we only looked at the 166 square miles, sir, we would not be able to support the quality of life that Barbadians have. And that is why the CARICOM single market and economy has been so important to us, because it expands our market. But beyond the CSME and beyond the foreign trade agreements that we have, Barbados has a geographical advantage that is unique. And that geographical advantage, as the first landmass off the African coast, means that we have to recreate our future. Sir, how many people in here know that it is only 8 hours from Barbados to Los Angeles? But we speak about Los Angeles as though it is literally far and away, literally in another hemisphere, literally incapable of being reached in one flight. But yet we got 20-something flights making that 8-hour journey to the UK every week. You understand what I just told you? As a matter of history and cultural and familial relations, we have cultivated that. How many people know that it is only 4.5 hours to Dakar in Senegal, in Africa? And that it is as easy to get there as flying to New York. How many people know that it is quicker to get to Accra by a half hour to an hour than to get Accra in Ghana, than to get from here to the United Kingdom? Mr. Speaker, this country has a future, not only in terms of traditional long-stay tourists, not only in terms of the air-to-sea passengers with the home porting. And home porting cannot only be seen as the United Kingdom or Europe. Home porting has also to be seen as Africa. Africans who can't get transit visas to go to the UK or to the US, and we know the story of transit visas becoming more and more difficult and complex. Chinese and Asians who want to cruise, who may not be able to get the visas to the UK or to the US or to Canada. If we have the airlift that can bring them through Mexico or Panama from Asia, or bring them directly from Africa, all of a sudden Barbados would not be talking about winter and summer like if we got snow and autumn leaves. We talk about summer and winter as if we are a North Atlantic country. But we have to change the structure of where our tourists and where our visitors come from. And that is just people. Let's talk cargo now, sir. The reality is that we have an opportunity to be a hub of choice, but we have to go after it. And when you look at the Northern Caribbean, that's pretty much Miami, Bahamas, Jamaica in terms of cargo. We need to be down in there with Panama and Colombia. Brazil tends to be far more south for most of its major ports. And therefore, Barbados has a unique opportunity. If we want to have a serious chance at agro-processing and fish processing, as the government is working towards, and as which we have credible investment opportunities that have been put on the table for us that are literally before the planning ministry, then we need to have the airlift because it's perishables. And we already know that Europe and Africa and parts of North America want what we are selling. And when you add to it the impact of the climate on the production of agriculture, then it gives us even a more unique opportunity to be able to do the agro-processing and the fish processing for us to allow for the market. If we had to rely on the Barbados market size alone, the food would continue to be expensive. But because we can now establish a hub arrangement, have the pack house and the agro-processing that's necessary, it means then that you can reduce your base costs for everybody, Mr. Speaker. And that is why the opportunity to be able to work with Venezuela on the 5,000 hectares and to work with Guyana, and we're not going about this in a piecemeal way, because this offers us the first real opportunity for massive industrial scale production. And people will say, well, where are we going? We're going where ownership carries us. Ownership matters. And when we had to fight the arbitration against Trinidad and Tobago, yes, we used local lawyers, but we also brought in international lawyers. when you have to do things of scale, you bring in the best that you can have access to, because ownership allows you to purchase the services, hire the services. The others laugh at me because I tell them I'm not buying any Cortinas. Give me best in class. Because whenever Barbados goes for best in class, we win. We win. We win. And in some instances, it may be us alone, or it may be us with other Caribbean companies or countries. And Mr. Speaker, the transport and connectivity is what is the glue that brings this all together. We cannot operate and be proud of an airport where the largest significant work was done 40 years ago, and then any other major refurbishment done 19 years ago, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect, there are other countries waiting to eat our lunch and our dinner and our snacks in between. So, Mr. Speaker, I ask honorable members of this chamber, by their voice, to support this resolution, and the public of Barbados to understand that it is our judgment, having had 3 chances at negotiations, that this one presents the best possible deal for us. I hear that there are people who are talking about the fact that this is an Arab company. Mr. Speaker, where do we now get off discriminating against people on the basis of nationality? And have we forgotten that Bajans going to Abed's every day for the last 40 or 50 years? And they're going to the beauty shop in St. Michael's Row? For those who want to play to the worst attributes of humankind, next thing you're going to hear that you shouldn't talk to people because they worship a different God? No, Mr. Speaker. We are the people that like Bob Marley. We're the people that know the words of Haile Selassie, if only because Bob Marley made them famous in the song War. Until. In fact, when you hear that word until, and there's a pause, you don't know what's coming. No, Mr. Speaker. And then the other part of the consortium is from Chile. Mr. Speaker, we are better than that. And I therefore will leave those who believe that it is their duty to use the radio waves to incite hatred and to incite racial and religious tension. And let me go further, sir. It was only less than a year ago that President Kagame from Rwanda was playing road tennis in Bush Hall, having planted a tree in the botanical gardens. But if I were to invite him to tell the story of Rwanda, then you and I would know that it started with people calling people cockroaches on radio, and long sleeve and short sleeve and all the other things that were meant to be euphemisms for inciting racial hatred. And in this case, it was ethnic tensions. Mr. Speaker, we may not always be the government, but as long as we are the government, we will not discriminate against people in this country on the basis of anything. And I pray that our leadership and our work and our engagement with people will get them to understand that this country, this parliament was guilty of the worst piece of legislation in the history of mankind. The 1661 Slave Code that said that people like us were not, black people were not human. And so powerful was the message sent by this parliament that it was taken up by many legislatures in the United States of America. Some exactly as it left Bridgetown, and some with what Bridgetown had as the core of what they came to do. And don't say that it won't happen again. Look at the foolishness that we're hearing going on in Florida now, trying to recreate history. Mr. Speaker, if you take an inch, if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile. There can be no toleration of racial inciting of any type or ethnic inciting of any type in this country. And I will go to my grave defending that principle, because that is not who we are, and we have come too far. That there may be some people who feel that way, I regret. And let us work to make sure that we can get them to understand that the only thing that that will reap is war and destruction. So, Mr. Speaker, I say that for what it is. I don't expect for the debate to continue in that vein, but I felt that it was important for me as leader of this government to address that insidious, undermining effort that was taking place by some on the radio programs, and to remind people that in 30 days, 1 million Rwandans lost their lives. Almost 10% of the country lost their lives because of the spawning and the inciting of racial hatred, not by saying and calling them by names, but by being euphemistic, by being finding words to refer to them as if what they were doing is cute and okay, but without realizing that that led then to the death of almost 10% of that population. We know better. Sir, as I said, this has been long in coming, and I want to thank the Honourable Minister, the member for St. Michael West Central, for shepherding this to its closure. I want to thank the member for St. James Central and the leader of government business in the Senate, who also would have had responsibility along this long journey in bringing the country to this point. The reality is that state-owned enterprise reform is still critical to this country's stability and development. And the government will go about it in a transparent way, and will go about it in a way that will inure, we believe, to the benefit of this generation of Barbadians, but future generations as well. And it will allow us to stay focused on the core responsibilities of central government that cannot be undertaken by any other entity. Sir, I commend the resolution and thank all those who helped us get here, and to the workers at the airport, to the management at the airport, to the board of the airport, and to the College of Negotiators and negotiating committees. I say thank you on behalf of this government, because it has been a lot of heavy lifting and a long journey. Thank you. The Management Commission, Mr.
Honourable Member St. Michael West Central.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I wouldn't be very long. I'll be very brief, actually. I also wish to join honourable members who would have spoken in this debate, and to thank them for their contributions. Indeed, the ministerial statement that I presented last Friday was quite detailed. And I would also like to, and indeed it was my first ministerial statement in this August chamber, and therefore I would wish to thank the Prime Minister and the Senior Minister and all other public servants who would have obviously been able to provide the necessary guidance. Mr. Speaker, honourable members in this chamber have spoken to the benefits in respect of the investment that we are about to undertake, and therefore I don't believe it's necessary for me to detain the chamber any longer in respect of that. The other issue is that we have demonstrated very clearly in my ministerial statement, and we've also, and the Prime Minister just alluded to it in her contribution, the contrast in respect of what we would have had we gone with the IFC versus what we have now, I don't believe is any reason to delay that. The Chamber unduly in that respect as well. What I would like to outline, Mr. Speaker, is the next steps. The concession agreement now has to be negotiated and signed. We have committed to having town hall meetings with the owners of the retail shops at the Grantley Adams International Airport and other parties who conduct business at the Grantley Adams International Airport. We also have a duty, Mr. Speaker, to have further consultations with those workers who are involved with all the entities at the Grantley Adams International Airport to ensure that they understand what it is that we are doing and that there's no added confusion being promoted by others who have their vested interests. Mr. Speaker, we have committed to a town hall meeting with the public. We are going to have that town hall meeting. That town hall meeting will answer any all questions presented because we have a duty to do so. Mr. Speaker, you know, this government is very, very clear. We came forward with full disclosure. Mr. Speaker, we were very transparent. We had meetings, as the Prime Minister and other speakers indicated, with the members of the social partnership. We had meetings with the unions, Mr. Speaker, all three unions representing labor at the Grantley Adams International Airport. There was a college of negotiators. It didn't include one politician, Mr. Speaker, not a senator. Nobody from in this room, Mr. Speaker. A college of negotiators very well equipped and qualified to negotiate on our behalf. They made their presentations to us, the board first, and then they made their presentations to us, and we have absolutely nothing to hide, Mr. Speaker. And of course, Mr. Speaker, I will never be part of anything that you have to hide, because we came forward and we campaign on transparency, and this is transparency at its best. Mr. Speaker, I am also familiar with corporate governance, because having worked for a public company all of my life, Mr. Speaker, and you know you have to follow governance, and there's nothing new. Sometimes you have to disclose, you have to sign warrants, you have to do whatever is necessary. And I'm satisfied, if you look at the processes that we have followed, that we have done an excellent job, not only keeping Barbadians informed, but following the highest degree of transparency. Mr. Speaker, we will take the workers along with us. We've discussed it. I've spoken to it in the ministerial statement, and other members have commented. But one thing I have to say, Mr. Speaker, and forgive me because, you know, I'm somewhat commercial. That is my background. Mr. Speaker, can you imagine a government of Barbados having to go to the international market to borrow $300 million? Let's assume that the term was 30 years. And let's assume that the interest rate was 5% over those 30 years. Mr. Speaker, the interest alone on $300 million would be $280 million, making a sum total of $580 million, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and if I go further, suppose it was at 8% on $300 million over 30 years. The interest rate would have been $492 million for a sum of $792.5 million, Mr. Speaker. And if you were in the joint venture market and you go to equity partners, and those equity partners say to you, well, I want 12% because that's my going rate. Because I could put my money out there at 12%, Mr. Speaker, at 12% on $300 million over 30 years. You know how much interest would have been on that, the amount? $811 million for a sum total of $1.1 billion. Mr. Speaker, we didn't go for 12%, we didn't go for 8%, and we didn't go for 5%. We saw an investment partner who could come into Barbados, make a minimum $300 million minimal investment, Mr. Speaker, with us still owning the asset. But on top of that, Mr. Speaker, we are getting a revenue share, 30%, 40%, and then, Mr. Speaker, 50%, Mr. Speaker. I sometimes don't like to argue with the uninitiated when it comes to the commercial terms of transactions, Mr. Speaker. But, you know, I'm not afraid to speak, and if I have to go on the calling programs, I will do so. But I challenge anybody in Barbados to tell us that the investment that we are making through our partnership in the Grantley Adams International Airport not having to pay a nickel and dime in interest for a minimum investment of $300 million. I challenge them, Mr. Speaker, to do better. And Mr. Speaker, if we were to borrow that money, Mr. Speaker, you know what would happen? Even if we went for 5% and it was at $280 million interest, you know what we would have to do, Mr. Speaker? We wouldn't be able to do the roads, as many roads as we're doing. We wouldn't be able to do what we're doing in education and healthcare, Mr. Speaker. And that is the difference between this Barbados Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, and the opposition. Mr. Speaker, it is a very good commercial proposition, not only for the Grant Williams International Airport, not only for the workers, Mr. Speaker, but for the taxpayers of Barbados. And therefore, when you want to talk about financial investments in a country and how we can benefit, we have to look to these issues, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I had to highlight that point, because it speaks volumes as to who we are, what we want to do, and where we are going, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to go into all the details about Jack Bridges and so on. We've flogged that horse already. Except to say, to complement what we're doing at Grant Williams International Airport, we will continue to build out our airlift strategy. We are working overtime to get that done, Mr. Speaker. Only yesterday, there was an announcement about the new Cayman Airways service to Barbados, which will commence in October. Mr. Speaker, we heard about Copa Airlines. You know that they started the third service on July the 7th. And all I have to say, Mr. Speaker, is to make the point, as I've already said in this chamber, I will come to work and work hard on behalf of not only the people of St. Michael West Central, but on behalf of the government and on behalf of the Prime Minister who gave me an opportunity to serve in 3 ministries, because you know you have to serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, I also wish to thank members of the negotiating team. I came in at the back end. I was not there. My predecessor, Minister Cummins from the other place, led it. Minister Simmons also had a hand in it. And I want to thank those ministers as well. I only came, like I said, at the back end, probably 8 months down the road, and also to help execute the program. The concession agreement, like I said, will be negotiated and agreed. I also want to thank the public servants who were involved in this transaction at the ministry. I want to thank the public servants who are here with us in the chamber today. Mr. Speaker, I didn't ask you for permission to call their names. I don't know if you will allow me to call their names, but if you don't, I just want to recognize the fact that we have the project coordinator of the Grant Williams International Airport with us, Ms. Gail Yearwood. We also have Ms. Diane Sherlin, who is the BSEC company, who is the Chief Executive Officer there, and Mr. Halliburn, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Grant Williams International Airport. I want to put into the records of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, the contribution of my permanent secretary acting, Ms. Nicole Taylor, who worked with us and did an outstanding job and left very late with us last Friday, but leading up to this transaction, and to my substantive PS, Ms. Francine Blackman, who also would have worked with other ministers in getting us to where we are today. It is absolutely necessary that we do that, because we have to focus on those persons who have helped us. And if I miss anybody, including the members of the negotiating team, other staff at the senior leadership of the Grant Williams International Airport, and others who would have helped us to get where we are today. I have full confidence in the negotiating team to advance to the concession agreement and to operationalize the agreement on behalf of the people of Barbados. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to be distracted by those who don't have the commercial vision, they don't have the commercial skills, and they don't have the commercial foresight, Mr. Speaker. And here is not the place for me to deal with them. Mr. Speaker, as you know, I have a branch meeting, I believe, very shortly. And there will come a time when, Mr. Speaker, if we were in a political setting, we might say we will have Christian understanding, or sinners will have to mourn. But that time will come, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I call upon all Barbadians to be mindful that this government will continue to shape the future economic prospects, not only for this country, but in this case, for the Grand Liams International Airport. I call upon all Bajans to continue to extend great hospitality that they're renowned for in expanding, and they expand on the beaches, Mr. Speaker, that they expand in the restaurants, in the hotels, the villas, all the taxi operators, and all those who help us as to promote Barbados, Mr. Speaker. And I want not only at the airport, Mr. Speaker, but to apply to all visitors and Barbadians alike. By its very geographical position, Barbados stands out, and the new project at Grand Liams International Airport will make Barbados stand out more. Mr. Speaker, I do not believe there's much more I have to add. Like I said, I want to give Barbadians the confidence and the assurance that we have their best interests at heart and that we will do right for them and by them. And Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would like to amend the resolution, and I will amend the resolution, Mr. Speaker. Whereas the Grand Liams International Airport is in need of investment, having not had major capital investment for a period of 2 decades, and whereas during COVID-19 pandemic, the airport moved from a position of profit to one of significant loss, having seen a cessation of commercial traffic. And whereas during this period of cessation of commercial traffic at the Grand Liams International Airport retained its entire staff complement. And whereas airports, which play a pivotal role in all economies, have to remain relevant, competitive, appealing, and financially successful in order to fully play their crucial role in contributing to the continued economic and social growth and development. And whereas a memorandum of understanding dated 18th July 2023 for a public-private partnership was signed between the Grand Liams International Airport and the Office of His Highness Sheikh Ahmed Dalmoud Al Moutoum, an entity registered and incorporated in the United Arab Emirates, and Agencias Universales S.A., a company incorporated in Chile, for the modernization, expansion, upgrading, and management of the Grand Liams International Airport. And whereas on the 21st of July, the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport made and laid a statement in the Honourable House of Assembly concerning the history leading to the said MOU and the terms and conditions thereof. Be it resolved that this Honourable House, 1, takes notice and supports the said statement of the Honourable Minister of Tourism and International Transport on the said MOU and its contents. 2, recognizes and supports the commitment of the government of Barbados to repositioning Barbados in the global aviation industry and redefining its role as a regional hub and a beacon of excellence for travelers and cargo in their markets. And 3, supports the government's pledge to broaden economic enfranchisement and contribute to the expansion of opportunities for the workers of Barbados and the creation of wealth. Mr. Speaker, I beg that this resolution, as amended, do not pass.
Who seconded it? Who seconded it? The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This resolution stands passed. Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the adjournment of the House until Friday, the 28th of July at 10 a.m.
Question that this Honourable Chamber be adjourned until Friday, the 20th day of July at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This Honourable Chamber stands adjourned until Friday, the 20th day of July at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.